Welcome, council, and any viewing audience we have on YouTube. We'll take a moment of silent reflection, and then we'll sing and stand for O Canada. Thank you. Members of council, you've had a chance to look at items on the agenda. Is there any conflict of interest or any general nature thereof? Seeing none, that'll be noted in the minutes. Like to adopt the minutes of the meeting held June 8th, 2021 be adopted as presented. Moved by Deputy Mayor Malage and Councillor Adiccio Spagnolo. All in favor? That carries. Anything to come out of the meeting? Nope. Okay. Mayor's comments. I just have a couple. Today we launched a newly designed municipal website. The website at lasalle.ca has been redesigned to make access to municipal information and services easier. Communication is important to us. Visit our website often to know what is happening in LaSalle and let us know what you think about the new site. At the June 21st LaSalle Police Services Board meeting last night, we recognized exemplary service for 3 members of the force. Congratulations to Sergeant Mo Tonin for 30 years, Senior Constable Brad Thornton and Senior Constable Kim Rathbone for 20 years each. We appreciate their commitment to LaSalle community. I think all of us recognize who they are and what a great job they've done. We welcomed back some of our outdoor user groups last week. It was great to see our community on the diamonds and the fields again, with some nights missed for the rain we had, but we're moving in the right direction. We are looking forward to the opening of LaSalle Outdoor Pool on July 5th for adult lengths, aqua fitness, recreation swims, and lifeguarding programs. Registration is required in advance and access will be limited based on medical health guidelines. Registration begins on June 28th, and administration will be providing some more information later this week. It's nice to see our programs and services starting to operate, and hopefully next week we hear more good news. So thanks everyone. Presentations. We have Windsor Essex Regional Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. We have Mr. Leonardo Gill and John Matheson.
Hi, Mayor Bondi. It's Brian Teefy. I'm filling in for John and Leo on this. Thank you for the opportunity to present and talk to you about an update for the Windsor and Regional Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. I'm just going to share my screen here if you don't mind.
Sorry about that, Brian. I've had a bunch of addendums and I didn't pull your name right away. Apologize.
Not a problem at all. Not a problem at all. I'm just going to get the slideshow up here. So I think, can you see that on your screen, Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Yes, so thank you for your time. I'll be fairly brief. I know Leo and the team that's leading the community safety and wellbeing plan have been pretty proactive in engaging council and the community on the steps of the plan. So this is a new requirement under provincial statute for every municipality. Windsor and Essex are doing a pretty substantive, proactive approach, working together on the plan, which I think is a good approach and yielding some good results so far throughout the process. And just before I start, I should just introduce myself a little bit. I'm a director at Strategy Corp. John Matheson and myself and our team have been engaged by the Windsor Essex team just to help support the process and the consultation and the finalization of the plan. So thank you for taking some time here for this update. I'm going to just walk through 4 sort of quick overview steps, the project background, talk a little bit about the consultation methodology and how we handled the consultation proactively with all of the pandemic restrictions, highlight a few pieces of information we gathered through that process on LaSalle, talk to you about the next steps, and then take a bit of time for you and Council Mayor to provide any input or questions. And we don't have to do that here as well. We'll have contact information to submit that after as well. And there's a formal approval of the final plan that will go to Windsor Council and Essex Council as well. So just a background on the community safety and wellbeing planning framework, sort of a new approach to policing that tries to gather all of the partners in the community to try and reduce the amount of incident response that police have to do, whether it's crime or mental health response or otherwise, and bring things up to prevention or the social determinants of health to try and proactively engage individuals and reduce instances of crime in our communities. I talked a little bit about the Windsor Essex approach already. There is a systems leadership table that is guiding the work, providing advice as we finalize the plan. And Windsor has, I would say, probably one of the most stakeholder-focused processes in the province with their enhanced sector leadership groups that are engaging various stakeholders, housing, immigration, and other groups across the region. So we've already done some community data profiles. We've identified priority risks and protective factors throughout the community, identified assets, and analyzed public consultation data. And now we're moving in sort of to the final steps of what I would call the beginning. The creation of the plan is the beginning, I would say. So we're nearing the end of the beginning. We've already done the asset mapping, as I said, a lot of municipal and sector engagement, public consultation via surveys that were done online and disseminated in print copies as well. The virtual meetings, there was, I believe, 1 in every community and 2 in Windsor, given the larger population. Right now, we're going through looking at the risk protective factors and starting to develop the priorities and strategies that will sort of be the basis for the final plan for the region. The next step after we sort of land on those priorities and strategies will be finalizing a performance and outcome measurement plan that will look to, how do we see if we're on track? How do we measure success, both at the regional level, but also looking to federal and provincial investments and how they may help or hurt the progress. And then the final step will be finalizing the plan, submitting it to the Solicitor General in Ontario, and then beginning the work to implement that plan. I believe the province is just consulting on a regulation that's looking at a 4-year window for these plans. So the review period, which would be a less onerous task than developing this first plan, would start again in about 4 years. Just in terms of our methodology, we look to provincial guidelines and the work situation tables are doing across the policing world, and identified seven protective factor categories plus COVID. We put that lens on the consultations as well, given the broad impacts. And we ask questions and sort of design the questions to try and get at how people are feeling, both what makes people feel safe and what may make people feel unsafe in their community. So the survey summary here, you'll see a lot of, I feel like we had a really strong survey response, 829 surveys. It's not statistically significant. It's not going to meet sort of the standards of a comprehensive survey to test public opinion, but we really did get a lot of good feedback from the surveys. You'll see the town of LaSalle had 112 completed surveys. Most of the surveys were completed in English, but other languages were submitted as well. Some of the regional priorities that when we went through the survey, there was a really good degree of similarity across the municipalities in terms of what were the core priorities, housing and neighborhoods, not just whether housing was affordable, but do you have access to the community amenities that sort of make your community complete and give you access to recreation, which was a bit of a challenge in some of the rural communities in the region. And traffic safety as well, I feel like was highlighted in some of our consultations. In particular, mental health and substance use come as no surprise as a top issue, and I think that those challenges have been enhanced by the COVID pandemic. Education and financial security, there's a bit of an overlap there. You'll see LaSalle prioritized education, but employment opportunities and education programs are sort of bleed into one another a little bit there. And then a little bit less focus on crime and victimization, physical health, or vulnerable populations. So on the summary, on the virtual public meetings, we had 139 residents attend. We really did have some great dialogues. I attended about half of them. I know some council members did attend, other leaders from the community, and just individuals and families that were had some issues or concerns with public safety. And we've got a lot of positive feedback on what we could do and what people are expecting their communities to tackle through the development of this plan. LaSalle had 17 people registered, 11 attendees, which frankly is a good number to have a good dialogue. So not maybe representative of the whole community, but sort of a good opportunity to focus group some of these ideas with some engaged citizens. And that's part of the reason why we're here tonight, is to get your sense of what we heard and maybe see how it aligns with council's views as well. So this is just sort of a sampling of some of the comments we heard at the meetings, specifically talking about mixed income housing, the development of community groups for seniors and youth to promote a sense of belonging, traffic safety, looking at ways to reduce the speed and make it safer for both drivers and other road users, cyclists and pedestrians. And one resident from LaSalle talking about better communication tools, and maybe that website is one of those new communication tools that can help spread information to the community. And some other pieces on mental health and education. The school closures obviously can impact their well-being, and that can affect public safety. there's one comment talking about, there's sometimes crime is visible on the street, but oftentimes criminal activity or drug use can happen where it's not visible to neighbors or to police resources, and it can still cause challenges and decrease safety. So watching out for that and finding ways to address substance abuse. The town of LaSalle specifically, I'll just dial in a little bit more directly on some of the highlights here. You would have seen some of them on the previous slides, but your top reported priorities: housing and neighborhoods, mental health and substance use, and education. People, I think, as you probably know, feel overwhelmingly safe in their community. Obviously, there's more to do. There's trust in the police. And I think one of the interesting points, if you look on the bottom right of the screen, if you look at the survey response, the number of people that have lived in the community for a number of years that responded, I took note of that, and just people definitely have a lot of pride in their community and know their community very well if they've lived there for a long time. You see, there's the female male split was skewed female a lot on the response. But overall, I think you sort of see some of the thoughts that people had with sort of looking at the community amenities in that vein of public safety, talking about communities, recreation and parks, green spaces that were accessible and satisfactory. Click on the next slide. So the three top priorities, as I mentioned, were mental health, housing, and education. You'll see financial security and employment. While it wasn't a top priority ranked by many, a lot of individuals that responded to the survey did have it in their top three. So, and you'll see, I think it intersects really a lot with education, housing in particular, perhaps mental health as well. One of the core things we heard with the mental health and substance abuse in particular, when you sort of dove into it a little bit more, was the access. How do I get services? Where and when do I get services? Can I get them at the right time, at an affordable price, or covered by health insurance or OHIP? On housing, it was on affordability, but as I mentioned before, comments on access to other services that sort of complete that community apart from your specific residence and the affordability of that. And skills development in particular, changing economy and trying to make sure you have those skills to have a job that can help make some of those other issues go away and improve the safety of our neighborhoods. And again, on the right hand side, just some other comments there on directly from LaSalle residents on what how people feel about their community. And just a few more on this. So we sort of this one is divided into sort of some of the positive factors and then some of the negative factors. So, something that's happening across Ontario is the rising house prices and the pressures that people are feeling due to that. People having challenges, maybe finding homes in similar neighborhoods they grew up in or similar sizes of homes, the access to counseling services in LaSalle, car speed. And someone mentioned the loss of the local newspaper, which, just that ability to see what's going on and be engaged in the community is very important. On the positive side, LaSalle is seen as a quiet community, good sidewalks and parks and schools, good emergency services, as Mayor Bondi spoke to a little bit in regards to the 3 officers with their exemplary service awards. And the lighting and beautification of the town makes it feel safe when you're walking around as well. So some positive pieces there. So next steps, we are trying to finalize with the leadership table and others the priority categories. Our working categories are these four here. Engaged in safe communities, mental health and substance use supports, financial security and economic equity, and good governance and data. What we see across Canada, across the municipal sector, is that data piece is really important in terms of measuring success and being able to make the case, whether it's staff to council or councils to the provincial or federal governments, to show people what is going on and how to move the needle to improve our community's well-being and safety. So under each of these, we have some opportunities, and then from this step, once we finalize that, we're going to go to dive into some of the performance and outcome measurements, identify actions. Sometimes they're small. Sometimes they don't cost a lot of money. It's more about collaboration. Sometimes they're big, and it's something that not only would be a investment opportunity for the municipalities, but also for the provincial and federal governments. Finalize that plan, and as I said earlier, that once we finalize that plan, that is the end of the beginning of this process. That plan is really the roadmap that the leadership table and any sort of new or reformed governance model would use to work with the councils and the police and other stakeholders to implement the plan and try and make progress over the 4 to 5 year life of the plan. And by the time we sort of finalize that and get it passed, approved at council, we're looking at around a November, I think October, November timeline to lock that in. Now, the Solicitor General had moved up the deadline to from January 1 to July 1 for approval. I know the city is in contact with the Solicitor General and providing updates. So we're working closely with them in terms of meeting the deadlines and the requirements that the province has, and I don't see any worries there. The last part of this really is just hearing from you, Mayor Bondi, and any council members on the presentation. Really want to know if what you saw there aligned with your views of the community. Do we miss anything? Do you want to reinforce anything? And as you're watching the finalization of this and implementation, what do you see in terms of success? What does that look like? You don't have to, this isn't your only opportunity. The last slide has Leo's email and contact information. So if a written submission or a phone call with Leo after, if there's important issues, can be arranged as well to further capture your advice and views. So I'll leave it at that. I hope I didn't take too long in walking through that, and happy to answer any questions and take down your advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Councillor Carrick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of things. In regards to mental health, I work in a mental health facility, so I understand that it's a global issue, to be honest with you, as opposed to local. So when we're gathering all the data and we're going to come up and formulate a plan, I know it's early in the process, but is there like sections where it'll be a phone call, come in, let's just use the police for an example, like safety community. Would it be dissected there and then sent to different branches, like to a social worker or to the hospital, as opposed to the police applying and then trying to figure it out, or arriving and then trying to figure it out? Is there going to be steps like looking at that, how to implement it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that sort of the mental health police partnerships that are evolving. I think that is definitely something that will in some way be part of the plan. I know the province just announced from an OPP context, mental health workers at OPP communication centers. So there's some different ways that we can, through this plan, advance those types of solutions in the Windsor Essex context.
Okay, thanks. And then one more thing. When it comes to, someone's got something going on. when it comes to affordable housing, this is a serious issue and it's very expensive. It's not a short-term goal. What's the long-term goal? What are we looking at? How are we going to get financing to help us offset some of the costs? Because that's a serious issue. And let's face it, 500,000 or 400,000 plus to buy a home is a non-starter for a lot of people. So how does that, what's the long-term for that look?
Yeah, I mean, housing is such a big issue. I think it's, when I see how this plan evolves, and when I've looked at other regional plans that have just been developed, they look at different ways the system can work better to connect people that may have a bit of an affordability problem to get some access to funding, or get some access to mental health services that will help them maintain stability in the home they're currently in. There's indicators. The good thing on the housing piece is there is some good data overall. So things like CMHC's core housing need. So there's numbers like that you can look at and measure and try and drive success, but things like that are hard to fund and hard to move with just the municipal tax base. So you'd be looking at trying to work with the federal and provincial governments to implement things like the National Housing Strategy and the housing benefit. But I think there's also municipal opportunities through the planning process and partnering with some of the nonprofits in your community to try and build a bit more housing. So I think the challenging thing for us with this plan is to try and capture what success looks like, think about it in the public safety context, and then offer some tangible sort of goals that we can work toward. I think housing is probably going to be one we're going to have to think about really, really carefully.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Any other questions, comments from council? Seeing none. Brian, thanks. Good comments. We'll see what happens, as you say, in the short term and long term. And if we can have a motion to receive the report. Moved by Councillor Reno and Councillor Desjardins, all in favor. That carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks you.
Now we have the Katie Denbach from KPMG in Dale. They must be honored to be here, Dale, with the 5 years in a row winning that award.
Yeah, absolutely. Your worship, members of council, the report before you includes the draft audited financial statements and the audit financial findings report for the year ended December 31st, 2020. This audit was performed by KPMG to ensure that the financial statements meet the public sector accounting board requirements and to ensure that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. As with all municipalities, the layout of the town's audited financial statements are different from the layout of the town's internal financial statements and budget. As one, the audited financial statements consolidate all town funds into one set of financial statement, whereas our internal financial statements and budgets are presented individually for each fund. And two, the audited financial statements are presented using the accrual method of accounting, whereas the internal financial statements and budget are presented using the cash basis of accounting. This is the first year that Chantel Anson, our supervisor of accounting, was the lead from the town side of the audit. She did a great job, and the audit went well and very smoothly as it has done in past years. Katie Denbach from KPMG has been the partner on the audit engagement for the past number of years. She has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to PSAB reporting requirements, and she's been a great resource to have and provides the town with valuable guidance on the various new accounting standard changes that occur and other various topics throughout the year. That being said, I'll now turn it over to Katie to present council with the draft audited financial statements and the audit findings report.
Thank you very much, Dale, and thank you for having me here this evening. What I'd like to do is just walk you through very briefly the highlights of our audit findings. You can find the audit findings report that Dale mentioned in your agenda package. And I'm really just going to stick on the executive summary because that hits the highlights. So that is on page 4 of our audit findings report, and the detail that sort of supports that executive summary can be found in the remainder of the report. So just for council's knowledge, we put this report together at the close of each audit as a means of communicating to you anything that we're required to communicate under Canadian auditing standards, as well as anything that we think you should be aware of in your governance roles over the financial statement audit. So in terms of where we are at with the audit, we have completed all of our audit procedures. We are ready to sign off on a clean or an unmodified audit opinion. The only things that remain are having our conversation with you here this evening and obtaining evidence of the approval of the financial statements. There were some new items in 2020, just in terms of the way that we conducted our audit. Obviously, the pandemic has had an impact, both on how we plan our audit, how we consider the materiality that we use for our audit, looking at our risk assessment through sort of a COVID related lens, and we've provided some information for you there, as well as the financial statement disclosures have been impacted in a couple of areas as well. So provided some information. I wouldn't say anything too significant in terms of changes, other than the fact that we did conduct our audit completely remotely this year and had no issues doing so. There was one audit difference that was identified that has been corrected in the financial statements that were provided to you. We did not identify any other audit adjustments that were left uncorrected. And we did not identify any control deficiencies or other matters to bring to your attention. We also do want to confirm that we are independent from the town and will remain so. And so that's really what I wanted to highlight for you. The rest of the report just goes into quite a bit of detail around the audit risks, the procedures we performed over specific estimates, but you'll see for the large part, there's really no significant findings to report. And the one other piece of information I'll draw your attention to is included in the appendix, and that is just some information for you on upcoming accounting standard changes. As Dale mentioned, we do work with the team there throughout the year to talk about these, and there are some bigger ones coming down the pipeline to be effective in fiscal 2023. So we'll continue to have our communications with management and discuss what the impact on the financial statements for the town of LaSalle might be. Happy to take any questions.
Any council questions? Seeing none, we need a motion to receive, approve, and adopt. Moved by Councillor Renaud, support by Councillor Desjardins. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you, Katie. We let you off easy this year.
Thank you.
We have Sprucewood condo developments, and I believe I have them in order. We have Mr. Valente, then Christian Lefebvre, Harry Frosios, Stephen Burrell, and Younghee Shum, if I said those names correctly. If I did not, I apologize. Does administration want to speak first?
Yes, Your Honor, sir. Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. The report before you tonight is with regards to the statutory meeting for the rezoning to allow for the development of approximately 1 hectare of land located at the north side of Sprucewood Avenue and the west side of Malden Road. If approved, the zoning change will permit the construction of 2 5-story buildings containing 70 units, along with 400 square meters of commercial floor space, which will front on to Sprucewood Avenue. On May 18th, this matter was before the Planning Advisory Committee. Concerns were raised at that time, and for the most part have been addressed and or will be addressed by the applicant this evening. Further, The proposed development is in keeping with our official plan as well as the county official plan to approve the development in principle, subject to a condominium site plan control agreement, along with site-specific rezoning. Harry Furrows will be making a presentation on behalf of the applicant, and I'll be available for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. And just to remind the delegates before they speak, it's limited to 5 minutes each. So Mr. Valenti, if you're ready.
I thought that the applicant goes first, but
I just have the delegates in this order, Mr. Valenti, so.
okay, I'll go. No problem. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Generally, we're not opposed to this development, just had some particular things we're interested in. Number one is we made some submissions at the Planning Advisory Committee, and I guess the applicant's consultant said that they'd be reaching out to us to try to resolve some of those concerns, and we did not have any contact with the applicant or the consultant. Anyways, I'll read in a letter that we wrote to council. It came in kind of around 5 o'clock, so I think I'll just read it into the record. But number one, just interested in this development. Is it proposed that there's going to be a severance that goes with this? Because the way that the report I just read reads, it's showing that it's developed as part of the commercial plaza. So it's really a little bit unclear. I thought maybe it would be severed and separate from the development, or if it's all going to be one development, then that answers one of my concerns. So on behalf of Oakwood Trails, we're just submitting notice of our concerns regarding the above noted matter to be heard before council this evening. Our concerns are primarily related to consistency between the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and the town official plan policies for the development of the proposed 2 5-story mixed-use apartment condominium buildings with 32 and 38 units respectively. Our principal concerns are related to the proposed density of the development, increasing from 50 units per hectare to 74.4 units per hectare. That's quite a large increase in density, and the proposed setbacks from the Oakwood Trails development to on the western property limit of the garages, we think it's not set back far enough. And the proposed height of the structure is increasing from 10.5 meters to 18.9 meters. We certainly feel that 10.5 would be more consistent with what's been developed to the south. The removal of the requirement for ground floor retail in the second building, given its proximity and orientation to the existing commercial development to the east. Most of the other things in this letter are redundant, so I won't expand upon them. But those are my submissions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Valenti. Mr. Lefebvre.
Good evening, Harry. Our consultant's going to speak, do a brief presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. My name is Harry Frusios. I'm with the firm of Salinka Priamo Limited, and we're the planning consultants as it relates to this application. I just want to thank staff for their support in bringing this forward, this recommendation this evening for your consideration. I do have a brief presentation that I'd like to share with you, if I'm allowed to share the screen.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, can everyone see that now? The cover page showing the rendering?
Yes.
Okay. So the purpose of the zoning application was stated earlier, is to permit 2 5-story buildings on the subject lands consisting of commercial and residential uses. The subject property is located at the north end of LaSalle within the LaSalle Town Center District at the intersection of Malden Road and Sprucewood Avenue. Commercial uses currently are located to the north, east, and south. We have residential and daycare uses abutting to the west, and institutional uses such as your schools, libraries, as well as open space and recreational uses are all within walking distance of the subject property. These are the subject lands. They have a total area of just over 2 hectares or 5 acres with frontage along both Malden Road and Sprucewood Avenue. Currently, there are 3 standalone buildings consisting of a mix of retail, office, and service commercial uses. And we've noted that as phases 1 and 2. Sorry, I'm just trying to bring my pointer up here. So this is generally the phase 1 lands that are already developed for commercial uses. And the west portion of the property, which is vacant, is phase 3 and subject of the application that's before you this evening. The proposed lot configuration, this speaks to one of the comments that Mr. Valenti just brought up. There is a proposed severance for this application to sever off the phase 3 lands from the phase 1 and 2 property. And even though there will be a severance, there will be 2 separate ownerships. There will be some common arrangements for servicing and access so the properties can still function as somewhat of a single entity. And that will be done through a reciprocal operating agreement. In terms of the official plan, the subject lands are within the LaSalle urban area. The lands are identified as being within the LaSalle Town Center as part of the community structure plan. The urban area is the focus of growth, public and private investment, and significant development. It supports the creation of complete communities with easy access to a wide range of uses, and it also encourages higher density built forms. And this development is located in close proximity to a wide range of employment, commercial, recreational, and service-related uses, which promotes walkability and active communities. In terms of the actual land use plan, the subject lands are within the LaSalle Town Center District in the land use plan. And this district is the focal point for major retail and other associated institutional and commercial development, as well as higher density residential uses. Residential uses are permitted as standalone uses on the property or within mixed use buildings in this district. Mid-rise buildings, mid-rise residential buildings rather, which consists of either apartments or stacked townhouses, are permitted up to 6 stories. And even high density residential buildings that exceed 6 stories are permitted within the district. And one of the policies is that new mid-rise uses be located on sites of suitable size and provide adequate parking, landscaping and buffering, as well as amenities. The subject lands are zoned town center commercial exception, C410 in the zoning bylaw. It permits a wide range of uses, including apartment dwelling units within a mixed use building. Maximum residential density permitted is 50 units per hectare currently, and a maximum height of 10.5 meters in height is permitted. The one thing I did want to note with respect to the density is that there are no policies relating to density in the official plan as it relates to the LaSalle Town Center District. The density permissions were implemented in the zoning bylaw, but not because there was any restrictions in the official plan. And this is the proposed site plan showing the 2 buildings. Again, 2 5-story buildings. Sorry, my pointer is acting up. This is the mixed-use building that fronts onto Sprucewood Avenue, containing ground floor commercial uses and 32 residential units on the upper stories. And then we have the standalone apartment building to the north of the other building, and it will have 38 residential units, and it faces west towards the residential and daycare uses on abutting lands. Proposed residential density is 75 units per hectare. And there will be 133 parking spaces provided for all the uses and consistent with the requirements of the zoning bylaw. In addition to this, there will be secured indoor bike storage. We're proposing 27% landscaped open space And we do acknowledge that there could be further refinements through the subsequent site plan approval stage. In terms of servicing and access, all services for the proposed buildings are available from existing infrastructure along Sprucewood Avenue. As I mentioned earlier, there are reciprocal easements required between all the phases for overland storm flow. And primary access to the phase 3 lands is off of a previously approved access along Sprucewood Avenue. And secondary access will be permitted off existing accesses to the commercial plaza along Sprucewood Avenue and Malden Road. This slide shows the pedestrian connections and all the landscaping that's been proposed as part of the proposed development. There is ample landscaping proposed along the north, south, and west perimeter to provide screening from abutting residential and institutional uses. We're incorporating a variety of hard and soft materials throughout the development, and then pedestrian connections, as shown in the red diagrams, are provided for both direct and indirect access to Sprucewood Avenue, the phase 1 and 2 lands, as well as the municipal sidewalk along Sprucewood Avenue. And you also will have direct access to the individual commercial units off of Sprucewood Avenue. Now, the next few slides just show the renderings of the proposed buildings. The first one is facing north from Sprucewood Avenue. As you can see, the positioning of the mixed-use buildings defines the street edge and provides an enhanced streetscape along Sprucewood Avenue. It's a contemporary design that incorporates a mixture of textures and colors. A generous amount of windows are being provided. The buildings are comprised mainly of 2-bedroom units, but there are 1-bedroom units also included within the building. Each unit will have its own outdoor patio or recessed balcony space. Just moving through the slides. This is the view facing west from the parking lot in the commercial plaza. This is the view facing south towards Sprucewood Avenue. And in this slide, you can see the covered garage at the west end of the property. And this garage is subject of a couple of variances in terms of its size and its setback from the property line. So the proposed zoning amendment that we're asking for consideration this evening is a number of items, and one is to include an apartment building as a permitted use, whereas apartment dwelling units are currently permitted only within a mixed-use building, where ground floor use shall only be permitted for commercial uses. We're asking the bylaw amendment to require the ground floor of the mixed-use building to consist only of permitted commercial uses and uses ancillary to apartment dwellings. The ancillary uses to apartment dwellings will be more towards the rear of the building, not directly facing Sprucewood Avenue. We're asking for permitted height of a maximum height of 18.9 meters. I will add that the actual height of the building is 16.5 meters. The additional height is required to allow for design features such as a parapet wall. We're asking for a required minimum ground floor height of 3 meters for the mixed-use building to allow for the commercial uses to have spacious accommodations, and a minimum gross floor area of 370 square meters for the commercial uses within the mixed-use building. The maximum residential density of 75 units per hectare is being requested, whereas currently only 50 is permitted. We're requesting the minimum side yard setback for an accessory building, being the covered garage, of 1.2 meters, whereas a minimum of 3 is required. And we're asking for a maximum gross floor area of 385 square meters for the covered garage, whereas a maximum of 200 square meters is currently permitted. Just for reference, I'm showing the previously approved site plan for the subject lands that showed a retail building as part of phase 3, and that would be a 35,600 square foot building that would back on to the current residential and institutional uses to the west. And in our opinion, now this is what we're proposing is much better in terms of compatibility with our abutting neighbors, in terms of interfacing the developments with each other. In this situation, you would have a loading area and parking directly backing on to the existing residential and institutional uses. And you'd also have a limited relationship with the Sprucewood Ave frontage, as you would have the side of the building and parking in between the road allowance and the building. And here we're just showing that we're proposing more compact built form as opposed to one large building. We have two smaller, more compact buildings, a little bit higher, but again, at the same time, they are separated more from the uses to the west. We have prepared shadow studies to demonstrate that there are minimal impacts, if any, on our abutting uses to the west. And you can see in these next two diagrams, in March 21st of 1018 is the largest shadowing, and it basically hits the northwest corner of the daycare property. But as we proceed through the day, the shadowing recesses and goes to the east. Similarly, in September, we have the same, pretty much the same, just a little bit different, but again, the impacts are the same, only at the northwest corner of the outdoor amenity space for the daycare. There are no shadowing impacts on our residential neighbors to the west. So our rationale for the zoning application in front of you today is that the proposed form, in terms of being a mid-rise building, the proposed height of 5 stories and the density being 75 units per hectare, is contemplated in the LaSalle Town Center District designation. There is a discrepancy now between the zones, the C4 zone that exists on both sides of Malden Road, but again, that is not because of a policy. That may have been a direction in the past from council to differentiate between the densities and heights on either side of Malden Road, but it wasn't based on an official plan policy. The proposed site-specific zone regulations promote appropriate development standards to support increased residential density and promote intensification on the subject lands in accordance with the policies of the official plan. Adverse impacts are not anticipated on adjacent residential and commercial land uses, and existing residential uses are all adequately separated from the subject lands. The proposed amendments are consistent with the provincial policy statement that encourages a range and mix of land uses to support development, redevelopment, and intensification in settlement areas, as well as make efficient use of municipal infrastructure. The county official plan and the town official plan both contemplate the proposed form of development at appropriate locations. Both plans encourage development, redevelopment, and intensification in service settlement areas, and the proposed development fulfills a need within LaSalle that can accommodate existing residents as well as attract new residents to the community. In conclusion, the proposed exception zones are consistent with the provincial policy statement and are in conformity with the county and the town official plans. Based on the above, it is our opinion that the proposed zoning amendment is appropriate and represents sound land use planning principles. And before I conclude, I just wanted to address the comments from Mr. Valente. And I just wanted to say regarding the official plan, I've already noted that the concerns about density are not, it's not an official plan policy that limits density in this area. We believe that we've demonstrated that the property is appropriate, can accommodate this development without causing any adverse impacts on its neighbors in terms of its setbacks, its height, its intensity, being able to provide sufficient landscaping and parking. And we believe it is a positive addition, not only to the site, but to the community. And same with the height. Again, the height, even though there is a permission for more height on the other side of Malden Road, the official plan does allow mid-rise developments to be up to 6 stories or 21 meters in height, and we are within that height restriction. The removal of requirement of ground floor retail. Again, standalone apartments are permitted in this district, and we are maintaining, as one building will have the commercial ground floor uses, and based on the zoning we're asking for, it will be a requirement. But the second building, again, it's based on the need to provide more units that we're asking it to be a standalone apartment building. And I do apologize if there's any confusion about not contacting Mr. Valente's planning consultant. I did receive an email that he did receive this package actually was not much different than what I presented in May. And I didn't hear back based on that. So I just assumed that there weren't any other questions, but I do apologize if there's any confusion that we were supposed to follow up with anything. Just in conclusion, I want to again thank staff for their positive recommendation. We do support the recommendation to move forward with the zoning in principle, and I'd be able to answer any questions that you may have, Your Worship. And if possible, if there are any comments, I would like the ability to respond if necessary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is Mr. Burrell with us?
Yes, Your Honor. I'm just the architect for the Sprucewood development, and I can answer any technical questions if they come up.
Okay, thank you. And then Young Hee Shum has provided written submission. So Harry, if I can ask you, can you unshare your screen? Because it's
Yes.
difficult for me to see. Thank you.
Sure, just let me, sorry, it's just minimized here.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, Council. We'll go with Councillor Paddock, Councillor Reno, then Councillor Carrick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Solani or any other of the planning folks. I understand, with the presentation that just happened, the interpretation of density. I just want to make sure that the interpretation that the gentleman has presented in his presentation aligns with how we view the density of these apartments.
That is correct. We do agree with the proposal by the applicant and the density that has been allotted. As Harry has indicated, the density that was proposed for that property through the existing zoning bylaw was on the basis of the previous official plan. And now that with our new official plan, it does allow for the ability for the greater height. And when we write our new zoning bylaw, we will be allotting a new density, which will be in keeping with this project.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burgess. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Paddock. Councillor Reno. Jeff, you're muted.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question involves the shared parking area. You talked about there being some agreements going back and forth to who's going to take care and maintain of all that. But I'm more concerned about how it takes away from parking from the existing commercial plaza that's there now. I would imagine, there's a fair amount of parking needed for the gym, for the ice cream parlor, things like that. How does that fit into this plan? And is the parking that's left going to be adequate?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Reno. Yes, the parking is actually sufficient. The applicant has already reviewed and the numbers as far as parking. There's no further relief required for the existing site. There is also the parking which is being added to the site from the existing lot. We'll have that shared aspect of it. So there will be crossover of commercial parking throughout that area.
Thank you. And one other question, Alan, is this something that we've done before where we share commercial parking with residential parking in the same lot? Like, this is something we've done, or can you tell me an example where we've done this before?
Thank you for the question. The actual residential parking will primarily occur within the parking which is being allotted around the building or inside the majority of the building site. So the parking garage and the surface lot. The majority of the parking which is being allocated in where the existing parking lot is primarily for the commercial purposes, and it'll also enable for visitor parking and whatnot.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Councillor Carrick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mine was around the parking and if there was designated parking for the commercial spots, as opposed to just random parking where they could just park all over in the overflow. So I do like the proposal. I think it's a good proposal, and I will make the recommendation at the time to move it.
Thank you, Councillor Carrick. Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you. Through you to the developer, I guess. I think I saw in plans that there are some barrier-free units. Will they be in both buildings or one unit or one building specifically?
Yes, thank you for the question, Your Worship. I don't have the floor plans in front of me, so I don't want to step out of line, but Stephen, are you able to answer that based on your, I believe they're going to be in both, but I'd like to have Steve confirm that.
Yes, to confirm, both buildings will have barrier-free required units. Ontario Building Code currently requires for 15% of the units in each building to be barrier-free accessible, mixed between 1 and 2 bedroom units. So both buildings will have 15% of each of the unit types will be barrier-free.
Okay, that's good to hear. I will.
Sue, you muted yourself.
Sorry about that. I wasn't sure if that 15%, because it's 2 buildings together under the same developer. I didn't know if that just covered one building or both. So I appreciate that answer. So then we'll have the appropriate number of accessible parking spots for both buildings and the commercial area.
Correct. We've accounted for barrier-free spaces for what's required for the number of spaces for the residential and included in the commercial portion as well.
Okay, thank you. It's good to see some extra building going in around, let's call it downtown LaSalle. So thank you for this proposal.
Deputy Mayor Malash.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. Everything's pretty well been addressed since our last meeting. I had hoped Mr. Valente would have had the opportunity to speak with you guys with his concerns regarding his development that's there. And I believe at this time, the only thing that we haven't addressed is the setback of the garage with his property that's sitting there. How close are these? Is this going to be an issue for the current residents that are living there? I think when we look at everything that was mentioned, you did mention we are changing the official plan to allow for the 50 to 74.4 to adjust for the height, but we didn't really address that setback issue.
Yes, and yes, thank you for that. And through your worship, I forgot to actually address that. The garage will be set back 1.2 meters, whereas 3 meters is required. Now we saw this as an opportunity to not only screen the cars, let's say, from the abutting property, but to provide a nice amenity for our tenants as well. In our opinion, this provides some screening from our neighbors and also reflects it doesn't allow for any headlights to be divisible to our neighbors. So to us it was not a big it's not a big issue, but again we can be open to discussion about that. But we just felt that it was an amenity that was necessary for our tenants and to provide a buffer, some additional buffering instead of just landscaping from our neighbors to the west.
Thank you. Mayor Bonnie, if that's maybe something, if everything else is in line with approval, if we could have that discussion between Mr. Frucios and Mr. Valente, because I think that's the only thing that's really outstanding right now that seemed to be an issue. So I don't know how we would handle that part of it.
Mr. Burgess, well, there's 3 recommendations in front of us. Would that be included in that recommendation, Alan?
Through your worship, at this time, the recommendation that's before you basically provides us still with an opportunity to continue ongoing discussions. We haven't come up with the actual bylaw as of yet. That will still be coming back before council. Additionally, we still have the site plan to finalize and the site plan control agreement to finalize. So there'll still be opportunities for some further discussions and refinements. I would also consider the fact that I believe the parking garages which are on the neighboring site are of a similar setback. I don't have that proposal in front of me right currently, but it would either be at 3 feet or 5 feet. So it is very similar in keeping with the development that's being proposed here. But like I said, we do have the opportunity for further discussions within the existing recommendation before you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Does that satisfy you, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Is there any other questions? If not, I believe Mr. Carrick was going to make the motion at the appropriate time. So you're moving the recommendation 1, 2, and 3. Yes, support. Councillor Reno, any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lefebvre. It looks like a nice project, and I will formally apologize because when I was interviewed on the radio, I mentioned this was Mr. Valente's development. So I apologize for that. It's Mr. Lefebvre's development. So thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have the Sunnyside Tavern redevelopment. And Mr. Burgess, do you want to start, and then we'll go to the delegates?
That'd be great. Thank you. Good evening once again, Your Worship and members of council. The report before you tonight is with regards to the statutory public meeting, additionally 1.2 hectares of land located at the southwest corner of Old Front Road and Moneta Avenue. If approved, the proposed zoning change would permit the construction of approximately 56 units, being a 6-story building. And the development includes both surface and underground parking, along with an improved boat dock area for exclusive use of the condominium units. On May 18th, this matter was brought before the planning review, the Planning Advisory Committee. A number of questions and concerns were raised. The applicant, Mr. Petretta, and his consultants did attempt to answer many of those questions that evening, and they will be available to answer further questions tonight. The proposal is in keeping with our official plan as well as the county official plan. And we are recommending the approval in principle subject to the execution of the site-specific zoning bylaw amendment, along with a site plan condominium control agreement. Mr. Petretta is available this evening to make a presentation on behalf of the project, and I am available for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Mr. Petretta, welcome. I have you as number 1, but I also have Tracy Pilon.
So
I don't know if you're going to start or.
I'm going to start. So thank you, Mayor Bondi and councilors. I appreciate giving me the opportunity to talk to you tonight. I do want to give you just a really quick rundown of our application, a little bit of history of the site, and then as Mr. Burgess alluded to, myself, Tracy, and our traffic consultant will be available for questions. So I'm going to share my screen now. I assume you guys can see that? Yeah. So just a really brief history. Sunnyside was a famous Prohibition era drinking establishment, gambling den, and burnt to the ground in 1972 and was subsequently replaced by a building we probably mostly recognize as the Sunnyside Tavern. After a really long time and hard attempts at trying to survive the restaurant business, we really couldn't see a path forward as a viable business entity. So we decided to look into redeveloping the property. All right, I'm just getting down here. So our vision for this property draws on some inspiration of West Coast modern architecture that you'd see typically in BC or Washington. But the real goal is to provide a diversity of housing options, and really would like to use or have the opportunity to intensify an underutilized site. An interesting note from earlier tonight, one of the original speakers talking about regional priorities. One of the things that you would have noticed from almost every municipality in Essex County was that there is a need for access to more housing. And we're hoping this development will help alleviate some of that concern. The property is known municipally as 99 Moneta Avenue and 2026 Old Front Road. It's roughly 3 acres or 1.2 hectares, and it's highlighted there in yellow. You'll note some interesting ownership of that Sunnyside Lane, and we'll talk a little bit about that further down, but I just wanted to give you an overall concept of the site and its location. So our proposal is for a 6-story, 56-unit residential condominium, currently all planned for 2-bedroom units ranging in size from roughly 1,100 square feet to roughly 1,400 square feet. There'll be 53 surface parking spaces, plus an additional 36 underground parking spaces. And with this, we have the ability to meet the current zoning requirements for multi-unit residential. There'll also be an access onto Old Front Road as well as Juanita, which will help for fire lane access. And then just something that came to my mind as we were listening to the previous discussion, just in terms of density, this results into 46 units per hectare roughly. Another really important part of our plan and what's going to make this project unique, and maybe not unique in LaSalle, because at one time I lived at the condominiums down the street at Crystal Harbor. We do want to present an opportunity for owners of the condos to have a deeded boat slip. So you'll see here, we're proposing 16 deeded boat slips, basically ranging in size from 35 feet to 40 feet. And part of the plan would be a much improved boardwalk, and as well as some naturalization of the banks that we can provide additional fish habitat and help to clean up that original existing dredge cut. The intention here of this elevation is just to give you an idea. Building height is roughly 64 feet. It's going to be a mix of materials, mostly natural elements, wood, stone veneer, and hopefully enough glass to provide great views of the water. A really important part of this development, and I find of most developments, is the functional servicing report, which we undertook just to consider what the impact on the existing services would be. So we hired R.C. Spencer to do this study for us. And what I'm presenting here is just a rough concept plan showing how we plan to manage our stormwater, sanitary, and municipal water supply. Another important component of this drawing is to see in the lower bottom corner, part of our development, we propose to start an enhanced widening of Juanita Avenue. This is going to require us to give a contribution back to the town. And I think sometime in the future, the goal would be for a full municipal width of Juanita for the full extent of our property. An interesting thing to discuss here as we're looking at this slide is part of our, I guess, information gathering session with the Planning Advisory Committee. The majority of concerns related to traffic and stormwater management because of some flooding in the area. So what we're proposing here, believe it or not only has no impact on potential future flooding, but it's going to mitigate some of the existing concerns because we are putting some improvements into the roadway that would take up some of the water that was at one time ponding onto Juanita Avenue. Actually, a really challenging component of this project, more so than other projects, there was an existing right-of-way. When this property was rebuilt in 1972, just immediately prior in 71, all of the owners of properties on Sunnyside Lane were given a 15-foot right-of-way across the property. As you can see, that right-of-way exists as this blue line. And as you can imagine, traversing across that blue line is very difficult to allow commercial or emergency vehicles, even garbage removal, makes it almost impossible. They've been going outside of that line now to make that happen, and it's been working out. But certainly what we're proposing here is a realignment of that axis, and we are hoping to provide a permanent right-of-way to directly to Old Front Road, and that would be in that green shape there on the drawing. We also spoke personally with each one of the owners on Sunnyside Lane just to let them know what our intentions are and reassure them that this is going to be a permanent easement, registered title of all the properties for their mutual benefit. And if I could just go up quickly, just to give you an idea of why, you'll see here that right-of-way would basically cut a third of our building off. And that's the main reason we need to relocate it. But certainly even for access, it's going to make that a lot easier for the residents and services. So, you heard from the last application, we have very similar official plan, discussion to have here. We conform with the provincial policy statement in fact we're providing opportunities for long-term prosperity and social well-being just by providing a diversity of housing stock. The official plan qualifies this property as a primary settlement area. So we conform with the county's official plan and there's no amendment required. And similarly, the town's official plan designates this as waterfront district. And as such, again, no official plan amendment required on that. Currently, the zoning is a mix of R123 and C2 commercial zones, which really only allows for single family residential and commercial uses. What we're here seeking tonight is a rezoning for a site-specific zoning, R5 zoning, which allows for 6-story residential apartment building. And I call it a site-specific zoning because there's 2 minor modifications to the zoning provisions of R5. We're able to meet the majority of them. The minor modifications we need are the reduction of the front yard and the reduction of the exterior side yard. The major reason we can't comply with the exterior side yard is we're getting a contribution of land for the road widening. So as part of this process, we've submitted a lot of reports, which we're not going to go through here, but certainly planning has all of them. The planning justification report that Tracy adds is online if we have any questions about that. Traffic impact study that John Toffenmeyer is available for questions about that later on as well. Functional servicing report, geotechnical investigation, shadow study, archaeological assessment, and environmental site assessment. So all those reports are available to you, and we're done to the satisfaction of planning and ourselves to make sure it's not only a viable project, but it's a safe project. So basically, in summary, we think the site is completely suitable for this type of development. It provides compatibility design with the surrounding area, good planning principles in that it provides residential redevelopment and contributes to intensification while offering a diversity of housing options. And there's no natural environment impacts or municipal service impacts. So having said that, I'll open the floor to you guys for questions or comments. And again, our consultants are here. We did submit a formal response to all of the residents' concerns, and that was provided to planning and was shared, I think, as part of this presentation tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bertretta. I have next Joanne. I can't tell you if she's here or not. Is there a Joanne with us? I do not see one, so I'll go to Mr. Jones. Ed Jones. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you. I've seen the proposal. I've sat in the first meeting and heard all the concerns of everybody, including myself. And I think it's a good project, and I'm anxious to see it come into our neighborhood.
Thank you. Now we have Wendy Griffiths.
Hi there. Good evening. Good evening, Mayor Bondi, members of council, Mr. Petretta. I just wanted to ask a few questions here. I did submit some paperwork, and I apologize if you got copies of my distorted map. But my biggest concern that I have with this particular project is traffic and safety. I don't know how many of you have been into this neighborhood to see that we are actually just a 1-lane road coming off of 18 highway. And this, if you'll bear with me, did you get copies of my map? Does everybody have the paperwork that came with that?
I do. Hopefully. I believe other council members received it. Yes.
Okay, great. Super. So you can follow along with me. I'm all for new beginnings, as the sign says. And I would like to see development of some sort, absolutely. My concerns are the amount or volume of traffic that will be coming with the project of this particular size. I'm not really sure that it fits aesthetically at a 6-story building, to be quite frank with you. This is all sort of cottage homes back in this area. But again, as I say, the biggest concern that I have is the traffic congestion. We have, if you look at that little map, we have 2 sets of lights at Juanita. Stoplight 1 is actually at Juanita, stoplight 2 is at International. When we exit off of Juanita and head northbound, we have traffic coming at us every which way. You've got people turning illegally on International. northbound. You've got the traffic coming in and out of the petrol station and the Tim Hortons. We've got Sir Cedric's there, and I'm sure most of you know on a Friday night, Sir Cedric's is pretty packed. So my concern, and I did hear Mr. Petretta say that he's working with about a parcel of land being contributed. I'm wondering if that's from the property owner to the north, because she's indicated through some conversation that she wasn't aware of that. So I'm just a little bit confused on that issue and how that's going to be widened, like is it going to accommodate 2 lanes? There is showing in the plans, they're showing that there is going to be an entrance and exit both to Old Front Road and to Juanita Avenue. So it's the traffic coming in and out on Juanita that's going to be a concern for sure. And then going into that intersection is absolutely just crazy. I cannot tell you how many times we have had near misses with vehicles coming at us. So you put another 80 vehicles into the mix and things are going to get even more dangerous. The other thing that I really wanted to talk about too was the flooding. As many of you know, back in 2019 and 2020, most of the homes back here were underwater. In fact, Mayor Bondi came and paid visit to us to see what was going on. That causes me concern as well, more so on the side of traffic. Again, as everyone knows, misery loves company, and we had so many vehicles up and down the roads here to the point where we had to have it policed because the vehicles were causing wake and further damages to our property. So that's a concern as well with an increase in traffic. I will also bring up the gentleman that said too, in the first presentation, Mr. Teefee mentioned that when polling the LaSalle residents, a lot of the responses were that people really like that small town feel. And that's precisely the sort of feel that we have in this area. And I would hate to see that footprint changed by something that may be too ambitious. In summary, boat wells, that was another issue too that was a concern for us because they're literally, I'm not sure the width of the canal, but I'm going to say 50 feet for all intents and purposes, that they need to be literally outside our windows and doors and in our yards. So there's environmental concerns, there's noise concerns. There's going to be a lot of pedestrian and vehicle traffic, and I just have concerns about some of those issues. I kind of would like to see this stay Old Town feel with maybe something that's a little bit smaller in size. And that's it. Thanks, folks.
Thank you. We'll save answers to the end because there may be duplicates in there. And I haven't seen you in a while, but that's a good thing because you're not flooding.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, I have Cheryl Godet. I don't see her, so we'll go to Stephen Halls.
Hello.
Yes. Hi, Mr. Hall.
Hello. Good evening. And I don't have a plan that a lot of the people have. I thought maybe they would have gotten sent out because we attended the first meeting. Would just be a natural progression that we would get that information. So I was looking at, when I first got on here, I was a little late. I see that there was a list of items addressed and it got taken down. I don't know if I'm going to duplicate some of these things, but safety is the first issue. There are no sidewalks and there are no extra parking on the roads because they are so narrow. Now, Mr. Petretta said that he gifted some property for road widening. Is it a gift or is it actually something that has to be given because he wants to build this property? And if it's not a gift, then it's, it's a mix of understanding there, I think. So with no sidewalks, no parking other than the parking lot he has, it seems like it's going to be a very, almost like they have over in England, where your house is right there and your sidewalk, you open your door and you're right on the highway or right on the roadway. And I don't think that's what we're looking for here. I think we need a safer area. As our neighbor said about the roadway there with Juanita and International, I put a call into the traffic people to put a sign up that says no turn on red light, not behind where the cars stop, where they have it, but across the street so they can see it. Not that that's going to make much difference, but it might make some of them stop and adhere to that rule. But I would think that you're going to have to purchase some property to bring those roads into an actual proper crossing, because that's treacherous. Tim Hortons, that Petro-Canada, Sir Cedric's, on any given day when they're running a good business there, traffic is a big concern, and that's safety. And there, like I say, there are no sidewalks. My neighbor, Ed Jones, if he likes the program that is set up, I'm all for it too. But I do want to see some safety concerns. I think 6 floors is way too much. You're going to have too many people in a very congested area. And I don't think the building should be right on the road and then a sidewalk. And then, you need space. You need space to breathe. Canada's a huge country. Do we really need to cram everything all right in? There's certain, you say you can put the prayer on the head of a pin. That doesn't make it practical. We should take the space we have, put something appropriate in there. And I think everybody can be a win here, not just, I forget how it was phrased as a golden waterfront opportunity or something, but that's about the gist of it. I think you understand my concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Halls. We have Scott and Christine Forbes.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm not sure if Carly Forbes is coming up on your screen originally, but that's my daughter.
You look good, Carly.
All right, well, it's her computer. So anyway, good evening, everybody. I've been a resident here for 31 years on Senator Street, so one street over. So I have 2 concerns, but I'll start out with saying it looks like you've done a lot of homework on the project, and it looks like you've addressed many concerns, and it looks pretty healthy. One of my concerns, though, is an existing problem already, which I think will only get a little worse with the increased residents at this new facility. So entering the highway, front road from Senator and coming in off of the highway onto Senator, as Wendy Griffith mentioned earlier, these are 1 lane kind of, let's say 1.5 lane roadways. And if I am coming off the highway onto Senator and somebody is at the same time trying to enter the highway and they're not familiar with the area, even if they are anywhere near the center of the road, that forces anybody coming onto Senator from the highway to have to stop with their tail end on the highway. I've experienced it numerous times, and as they say, that universal language is coming from their horn and their finger when they're trying to get by us to get onto our street, and also allow that car to get out of the way to come onto the highway. So I think I know there's a traffic light there at Juanita already, but I've experienced a lot of people that will try and avoid the traffic light and just come out off of Senator because there's no traffic light. So it's a little easier to get in and out sometimes that way if there's no traffic. So I think that it could potentially cause some traffic to come over towards Senator to get out onto the highway, causing further problems. And if you've got 1 or 2 cars trying to get onto Senator, they are literally on the highway. Their tail ends on the highway. So just if you can give some consideration, I don't know if there's a potential of widening the mouth there to help alleviate some of that concern. But if that's something that can be looked into, that's one of my concerns. The other being, and I may have missed it because I tuned in a little bit late to the meeting, is with the new facility and the amount of people that are going to be there in boat ownership in the back end, it's more than likely there's always visitors. So has there been consideration given to visitor parking So company that's coming over, whether they're visiting and or going out in the boat for the day. What I'd hate to see is cars having to park on the side of these narrow streets already. So that's another concern that I have. Not that it'll probably affect where I live, but it will affect Juanita and Manhattan, which is across street there. That's it.
Thank you, Scott. Good point.
Excuse me, sir. I'm sorry to interview. Steve Hall's here. There was one item I forgot to mention. When they did the traffic survey, was it done during COVID? I mean, there's hardly any traffic on the road and we still have problems. So when we get back to normal, it's going to be a whole big bag of worms. I'm sorry to intervene.
That's okay, Mr. Halls. All those answers will be given to you at the end when everybody has a chance to speak, but thank you. So now we go to Hugh Campbell. We'll give Mr. Campbell a minute or so if he can log himself on. Okay, I'll watch for Mr. Campbell, but I don't see him coming on. So we'll maybe Mr. Mara. Oh, there you are, Hugh. You're still muted. There you go.
That good?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Council and Mark, for bringing me on to address my concerns. Yeah, there is everything that's been said is all true. The huge impact to traffic. It's basically a marina now, along with residential, and the private road issue. People maybe want to access their boats from the private road. I don't even know if that is being looked at. That is another concern. Did anybody even mention, because I never seen any plans at council meetings, whatever, I never went to them, but it was never mailed or whatever, about sewers down this road. Is that part of the project? Since 88 or whatever, 56 units going up there. Is that part of the official plan? I got to throw that out there. But yeah, I just think it's going to be a big impact on density. People just, it's going to be turned into a big party, obviously, with a marina. So yeah, the neighborhood will change immensely. Wendy had mentioned, it's a little cottage area. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there that parking and density is a problem. And the value of the homes, I guess, or the apartments, $500,000 approximately. Does that mean it's going to take two people to pay for them things, which every house unit should have 2 parking spots? Is that part of it? I don't know. Affordability of the homes. And is it 80 something parking spots? Is that enough? So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I've been informed there are 2 people who would like to speak who were not registered, but I'll allow it as long as it's not the same concerns, so we don't duplicate. So we'll start with Mr. John Toffelmeyer.
John is my traffic engineer who'll be providing answers later on. So.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thanks, David. And David Mills.
David is also with our company, so he's not looking.
Perfect. Okay, great. So why don't we go to Mr. Mara to answer some of those questions in relation to road and property.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we're all done with the delegations, maybe I'll start off and then I can probably pass it off to the applicant and to Mr. Toffelmeyer to kind of expand a little bit more on some of the items that were discussed and or concerns that came forward. The first concern that I recall or that I heard was sanitary sewage capacity and sewers that in themselves. With respect to this site, what is being proposed here is already designed and allocated to the sanitary sewer system. So there is adequate capacity within the existing sanitary sewer system to accommodate these units and the number of units that are there. That has been in place for a number of years, since the early 80s. And so certainly with respect to the development of this site, that is able to accommodate, and that has been verified through the applicant's consulting engineer through the functional servicing study. With respect to storm drainage, this site is not making use of any of the existing storm drainage systems that are existing within the right-of-way. They are outletting directly into the river and into that dredge cut that they own. So certainly they are containing everything within their site, and they are providing that proper stormwater management, stormwater quality and quantity control to deal with their site with respect to storm drainage. So they will outlet directly into the sewer cut. On a larger note, within this contextual area with respect to storm drainage, as council is aware, and certainly I want to advise the residents that we are just kicking off the study for the Detroit River storm outlet systems, the storm master drainage study that is underway, and that just started. So certainly residents should feel free to visit our website. There is information on that, preliminary information right now, but we are going through a formal review of the entirety of this area, along with all the areas along Front Road. So with respect to existing conditions, with respect to outlets to the river, that is being looked at on a global basis, on a larger basis with respect to our master drainaging study. Certainly, it is a large study. We will be progressing through that. And certainly with respect to any of the existing houses there on Juanita and Senator, that is where that will be properly kind of reviewed and looked at. And it's going to come up with solutions and identify potential solutions and recommendations for future implementations. Of course, solutions are not going to be very cost effective. They are going to require a number of years to implement. One of the final items, and Mr. Toffenmeyer can kind of explain a little bit more in detail on his traffic analysis, but with respect to the roadway and the contribution that Mr. Petretta is providing to the town, the existing Juanita right-of-way through this area is 20 feet wide. Our typical standard cross-section right-of-way width are typically 66 feet wide. So with that in mind, when Mr. Petretta came in, we had asked Mr. Petretta to convey basically 23 feet to the town. So he has complied with that. So he will be conveying 23 feet to the town. So 23 feet plus the 20 feet, that gives us basically 43 feet. So we're 23 feet shy, which in the future, if and when any proposed redevelopment occurs on the north side of Juanita through this area, that is when the town will secure the additional property required to make a proper right-of-way there and build a proper road, a proper 8 meter wide road through this area. And in addition to Mr. Petretta conveying the property to the town, and again, he's conveying it at no charge to the town. We get that free of charge. So it can be considered a gift. He's also required to build a portion of the permanent road. So he is completing the south half of what a permanent 8 meter wide road will be, which includes curb and gutter, which includes sidewalk, which includes street trees and all of those aspects with respect to what any developer would do. So he is responsible to do that along Juanita as part of his proposal. In addition to property along Juanita, the town is also, I remember and I recall securing property along Old Front as well to properly get Old Front up to a proper right-of-way width. Again, these are existing roads that have been in place for decades. They were not built to proper municipal standards, or they probably were built to proper municipal standards at the time. I can't say that they weren't, but certainly they don't meet the standards today. And with respect to that, with respect to the formal traffic analysis. We did request that that be done, and Mr. Petretta and Mr. Toffelmeyer can maybe expand on that a little bit more with respect to counts and how the site will operate as compared to what the site used to be with respect to a restaurant and bar. But certainly, hopefully that has provided a bit of context, and I'll pass it off. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mara. Mr. Petretta.
So thanks. I think I'll address the majority of the concerns, and then I'll leave the traffic for John to discuss at the end of my conversation. I just want to tell you, I get the concerns because this is maybe very new to everybody in the neighborhood. We've had a lot of success on very similar projects in local municipalities in Essex County doing the exact same thing, integrating a medium density residential building within a single family development area. And I have to tell you, it's, all of the concerns that people had up front are alleviated as soon as they see, number one, the quality of what we're proposing, the improvements to the area. All of those concerns kind of go away when it's done. So we're not trying to cram something in here. We think we're doing something that will be a huge compliment to the area. So one of the biggest misconceptions, and I think Mr. Campbell, and I want to make you understand, is not a marina. This is boat slips that are dedicated to owners of the property. This is a lifestyle community. There's no transient boat traffic because of the fact that those are all deeded separately. Boats are not coming in and out every day. People are not allowed to own those boat slips unless they're an owner of the property. We want to avoid people coming to park on our property or park all over Sunnyside Lane or Bonita to try and gain access to the boat. So that's not happening. There will not be traffic on Sunnyside Lane to get things dropped off of the boat. That's why we're building an enhanced boardwalk. So what we are providing is an amenity to our residents. The condo corp is going to be responsible to maintain it, to secure it, and all of those things will actually really improve the situation as exists now, because there will not be transient boaters in there. There will not be transient fishermen. And I think you'll be very happy to see that. We're talking 16 boat slips, I think 16 or 19. Very little traffic. They're parking parallel down one side of the property. There's plenty of width in the canal to not worry about them interfering in the local property. The other thing is, and I'm sure John will talk a little bit about this, the parking component of it. The demographic we're seeing buying these condos, and again, I'm using experience from the last 5 or 6 condo projects, are not your typical workforce going to work at the same time of day as people in the surrounding neighborhood. So although we have 60 or 56 units here, we have to provide the number of parking spaces to meet the zoning bylaw requirement. Historically, in all of our projects, on average, we have maybe less than 1 car per unit, just because less people are driving, people are biking, there's access to amenities nearby. So your concerns about traffic really will be mitigated once you hear a little bit about John's discussions about off-peak traffic hours. And really, that's about it. I think I'm always available, and I mentioned this during the planning meeting and information gathering session, to talk about these concerns and see how we can mitigate them. But, based on our experience, we've done everything we can to move the building, to make it less intrusive, to mitigate traffic concerns, and to make it a safe site. So I think you'll be very happy with the project if it gets approved and once it gets built. So with that being said, I'd like to ask John to maybe just comment on all the traffic concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I appreciate the comments from the delegations, and I'll try to respond to each of the individual issues. And perhaps Peter at the end may have some additional comments. The first thing that struck me was that there's an impression of something like 80 new vehicles or that type of number associated with the development, but there are only 56 units. And if you had 56 single family homes, you might get 50 or 60 peak hour trips generated. But with this style of development in mid-rise, it's actually going to generate less than half of that in terms of peak hour trips. So the concern about volume is not one that we would consider to be an issue of this development at all. The second point is related to the impact of COVID and the data collection and such. So I do want to point out that I was happy to be a part of the consulting team that did your transportation master plan. It was approved in January of 2020, I believe. And so we had access to all of the traffic data associated with Front Road and such. And we did do additional counts in the fall, which was in a time of between lockdowns, I guess you might say. But we did make sure that our data was consistent with historical data. And as Mr. Petretta has just indicated, the COVID issue has certainly made a big impact on traffic and on traffic volumes. Some of that is short term, but you know what? Some of it may well be long term. There's going to be a need to look at the pattern of traffic volumes now as we come out of, we hope, the lockdowns and as social and business activity resumes. However, we already know that there are going to be permanent changes, for example, to the workforce. And these things will assist in reducing congestion and spreading out peaks, and also, importantly, helping to emphasize active transportation, walking and bicycling and so on. And I know how important that is to the town of LaSalle. So we see this development not generating a big problem for anybody. And in fact, the fact that you have a traffic signal available right at the doorstep, and I do understand the sort of unusual configuration of the intersection and the signalization, but nevertheless, it provides a basis for safe access to and from Sandwich or Front Road. And that's a big benefit. It's underutilized, to be honest, at the moment, and can easily handle the additional traffic here. It also provides safe crossing for pedestrians and bicycles. And so we see very few problems associated with the development in that way. I think one of the delegations also mentioned a concern about traffic using Senator Street, but we don't see that as a likely possibility. The main access to the site will be off of Old Front Road, and we see that as the most important accessible access. And someone would have to really go out of their way to get to and from Senator Street for access to the site. So those are my comments, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I don't know if David or Peter wish to respond any further, but thank you.
Mr. Petretta, Mr. Mill, nothing?
No, we're good on our end.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Jones.
One of the concerns, I guess, because I live down the street and I've been walking, my wife and I, for years, the fact that there's a traffic light there is true, but in order to cross the street at Juanita, there's no button. There's no thing to turn that light or for us. So we have to walk down to the South Pacific restaurant to get across the street to push the traffic button. And then on the opposite side of the street, a similar thing happens. It's on the opposite side of where you want to be, the button to cross the street. So maybe that needs to be looked at by the town, but I don't think it has anything to do with the development. It might be to do with the town and pedestrian access back and forth across that intersection. The pedestrian stoplight is not well suited for everybody at all four corners, if you want to say that.
Thanks, Mr. Jones. Mr. Morrow just popped on. I'm sure he has an answer for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly, the traffic signal light at Front Road and International and Juanita is a unique situation. It is considered an offset intersection, and it is one of the more difficult type of intersections to signalize because you have to ensure that the various stages and phasing of the lights allow traffic to clear out in between the lights in order for traffic to continue moving. What plays into that scenario is also pedestrian movement because you need the traffic to clear out before, and you really don't want to have pedestrians in the way. So the way the light has been set up is to concentrate the pedestrian crossing of Front Road at one location, so not to best deal and better deal with traffic movements and trying to clear out the area between the two signals. Certainly, we can certainly take a look at it, but there are a number of initiatives that are being reviewed now on Front Road that are part of the Transportation Master Plan, Active Transportation Master Plan, and certainly the area is going to be certainly reviewed in probably future years. So certainly it is one of the more difficult, trickier types of signals and intersections to deal with from a traffic standpoint, from a delay standpoint, and trying to get pedestrians to move. But certainly it is slightly out of the way, but it is a convenient, safe way to move and move across the intersection. And certainly those are the items that I just wanted to bring up with respect to the pedestrian movements, with respect to that current offset intersection. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. Thank you for that point of observation, Mr. Jones. Okay, now I'll open it up to council. We'll start with Councillor Carrick, Councillor Desjardins, Councillor Dicho Spagnola, then Councillor Renault.
Just a quick note with the overland flooding and the underground parking. That's the concern I have, is the overflow running down in there. How are we addressing that?
Mr. Mayor, can I go ahead? Yeah. So basically, we've hired Rick Spencer to do our stormwater analysis, and that's part of our functional servicing study. We have quite a bit of experience with really sensitive underground parking garages. We're doing one right now, 10 feet from Pike Creek. We've been working with IRCA to determine what the 1 in 100 year floodproofing elevation is. So all of the openings have been elevated to ensure that they are much higher than the floodproofing elevations at that storm level, and actually even beyond, because we're not extremely comfortable with 1 in 100 year storm either. So we have put a lot of thought into that, and we're very comfortable with what we've come up with.
Okay, just a couple more, maybe just some comments. I think it looks awesome. I like the idea that you push it north as opposed to south, so it's not on top of those residents like Mr. Jones in that area. I do have some concerns like the residents about traffic and that stuff, but that's been talked about and addressed. I think if we look back and we had the old arena there, we had the Sunnyside there, we had a ton of traffic coming in and out of there all the time. This won't even be close to that, in my opinion, from what I'm hearing. I think if we're going to help revitalize Front Road, like we've all committed to, that new buildings, new development, it goes hand in hand with what we're trying to do. And I understand, as Peter had mentioned, that the traffic calming and the studies that are coming for Front Road might help alleviate some of those issues down the road. It might take some time, but I mean, rejuvenating Front Road is what we've committed to, and I think this project goes a long way to helping that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Carrick has voiced some of my same considerations, and I actually did speak to a planning person about the flooding, because that's a very big concern down in that area. And I've been assured that with what Mr. Petretta has done in some other areas, and including this one that's 10 feet off Pike Creek, have worked very well, so that it shouldn't be an issue. I'm happy to see that we as the community are building up Front Road. That's something that we've talked about for a long time. And with our Small Coast project, and now with this development with Mr. Petretta, and hopefully this will spur some activity around the old arena as well. We're building it up, and we're giving back to the citizens what they've asked us to do, and that's to build up Front Road. So I am in favor of the project and will make that motion at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Councillor Desjardins. Councillor Edicho Spagnolo.
Thank you. Through you, just a comment. So I was part of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting, and I feel that Mr. Petretta did cover a lot of the issues that residents did bring forward. I think it'll be a new, wonderful asset to Front Road, and I will echo what Councillor Desjardins said. I am definitely in favor of this, and I think it'll, just with the things that he will be offering to beautify that area on Juanita, I think it's just a great asset for the future development of Front Road. So I too will be in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Renaud.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wanted to thank all the delegates and also thank Peter for the explanation of the road widening and the potential of even more road widening in the future. I think that is a big part of what people are worried about. And I also want to thank Mr. Toffelmeyer for explaining, the way traffic moves and the way people move in their typical day and the type of people that move at different types of the day. It makes us all understand how we can make something like this work in a spot like this. So one question to Mr. Petretta: have you done other projects in LaSalle?
Well, we've done quite a few commercial developments and industrial developments, and really in terms of residential condos, we're working on one at the crossings at Heritage. That's almost complete as we speak. We're starting up phase 2 of that very soon, which is a 94-unit building. So we're fairly committed to LaSalle. We've been there for a while, and we're happy to be there.
Very good. I think it's a beautiful looking building. It will be it'll be something different for the area, and I really do think it'll help spark some of that development and change in usage that we've been looking for so long. So thank you very much. At the appropriate time, I will support Councillor Charlie.
Thank you. Any other council questions? And I believe Councillor Desjardins was going to make the motion. Okay, moved by Councillor Desjardins, support by Councillor Edicho Spagnolo. All in favor? That passes. Mr. Petretta, just a comment. When I saw this, I went, oh shit, sorry, but this is 40 years too late. I was a boater up until I got into politics, and I used to water ski competitively. Now you're doing this. I just finished building a house, and I said to my wife, this would be a great cottage, but it's only half a mile away from me.
You know, the market is really hot. You can sell your house and buy a condo.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time tonight.
I've been married 38 years. I want to stay that way.
I get it. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you for everyone. Thanks for the delegates and the residents who spoke, and Mr. Toffelmeyer and everyone who contributed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have the revised closing and sale of alleys policy update. Mr. Burgess? Sorry, my screen's just popping with people cutting off here. Is Dominic, is it you?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay, sorry.
No worries.
I have to rearrange my screen here. Okay, thank you.
All good. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'll try to be fairly brief in terms of tonight's review. I know that we've come back to the table a couple times on this one now, so I'll remain fairly high level on the items that I believe we've already discussed and are fairly agreed upon, and then just touch on the I guess the key change before you tonight and some of the rationale behind that. So in terms of the changes that we've already presented and have been before you before, is that in the new policy or updated policy, we're going to update the definition of structures. That way it's in line with our zoning bylaw to ensure clarity and consistency across the board. There's going to be just an increase in the pricing of the transfers, whatever is in queue right now, and there's quite a bit. Those will remain under the current rate of $200 per alley portion, but in terms of going forward, we're looking at moving that number to $350
proportion, which is still, it doesn't come close to a full cost recovery when we take into account reference plans, staff time, and registration of all the transfers, but it at least it goes to offset some of that and should let us take a slightly more aggressive tack in terms of getting these done and wrapped up sooner in terms of budgetary constraints. So that was one change. And then the last one was to have staff fly a drone over the current open alleys that are to be closed that we know are coming up, just to get an accurate and clear snapshot as to what exists today, what exists this summer. That way we can maybe take a more aggressive line on future offenders, as opposed to the situation we run into where there's existing structures or issues in the alley where we can at least, have some sort of a maybe a public notice or something like that, where we can let them know that, going forward, this is how it will be enforced. But in terms of how we want to deal with existing structures, that's what the final change discusses tonight. And that's where I'll kind of go into the rationale there. And this is one of the concerns that council raised in the last meeting, was with respect to rewarding those individuals who have encroached beyond I'll say beyond the halfway point. And ideally the halfway point, everything's unencumbered, both parties get a half of the alley. So we say that each side is entitled to half, even though that's that's the ideal if we could split it 50-50. So that first half is offered at the updated price of $350, and then beyond that, it's a matter of how do we deal with those individuals and how they shouldn't be, quote unquote, rewarded for encroaching beyond that halfway point. And one of the issues there that, from a practical standpoint, as council is likely aware, is that a lot of times the individuals who are encroaching over the halfway point, they didn't build the shed, they didn't build the fence. It could have been 2 owners ago, it could have been 3 owners ago, it could have been there for a number of years. And there's a varying amount of structures, quality of the fences, quality of sheds, whatever the case may be. We're talking a whole boatload of different scenarios here that we would get into. So again, it goes back to the initial policy decision of recognizing what is there and not trying to remove any structures in there. So the solution that that administration has recommended before you tonight is that we will be charging the individuals a fair market value for that portion that's beyond the halfway point. So if we cut it in half, the first half, if they're encroaching, that's the $350, but that's what they would have been otherwise entitled to in a perfect world. Anything beyond that point, whether it's the full 7 feet, whether it's another 3 feet, multiply that by their width, and then administration will determine a value there. And I use the term fair market value, and I use that specifically just to allow for some flexibility, because there is a number of different factors, I guess, that would go into that fair market value calculation. Currently, when we transfer alleys or property in general, typically, if it's not a building lot, we'll leave those aside, but just extra land, it's transferred at a price per square foot. And that price will differ whether or not there's an easement or not an easement on that title. Basically, is it clear or not? There's also alleys that run on people's side yards. So you could have increased frontage, which is obviously, that's going to be a more valuable piece. That the reason that we defined it this way as fair market value, it gives administration that ability to determine this on a case-by-case basis, because to try to capture all of these different scenarios into the policy will just make it would be overly cumbersome. So we felt this would be the simplest way to go forward, and it wouldn't deviate from how we currently go about things. It's just a matter of, rather than trying to capture all those different scenarios into a policy, just it lets us handle them as they come. And certainly it's worked in the time that I've been here, and as far as I'm aware, for quite some time before I arrived. So that is the reasoning behind the fair market value. And then in the event that the owner doesn't wish to participate at that point in time, that is when the hardline stance of, okay, well, you are encroaching on land that otherwise you shouldn't be, so you'll have to remove whatever is on there. Otherwise, we will remove it at the owner's costs. And then we would transfer the cleared portion to the abutting landowner. So that's basically how that process would play out for any situations where the land is owned beyond the midway point of the alley. So we're trying to at least recoup or charge some of the fair market value for those individuals, so they're not getting that extra land for free or for this discounted cost of $350. But at the same time, we are in keeping with the policy that we're not diving straight into, okay, well, we're moving the structure, going back to the halfway point. And I would suggest that there would be a much greater number of individuals coming before council for reviews on a large number of alleys if we were to go down that route. And lastly, I just wanted to address, there is one point in the addendum that the delegates have presented tonight with respect to the straight lines and in keeping with that. And my comment with respect to straight lines and why it's not explicitly in the policy itself. So we call that lot forming, and that is in the internal administrative hands when we look at dividing the alleys. But as council is aware, there is, I don't know how many alleys that we've been successful on, where if we were to follow this straight line method, there would have been, again, a much greater number before all of you to make decisions on, because there's been offset fences, there's been slants, there's been different structures in there that we've been able to successfully work with landowners and work around that, and it's allowed us to come to many more resolutions than it has led to different, I guess, to different arguments that have ended up before each of you. So that is why it's, yes, that's still part of what we look at internally, but to put that directly in the policy and say this is I guess priority number one, that would have, that would basically shift the policy to, we're in the business of removing structures if we have to create these straight lines. So that's why it's not explicitly put in there, but I know it was raised by the delegate, and I figured I would just address that before you at this point in time. So those are my points with respect to fair market value, why we left the straight lines out. You know the other amendments from previous discussions. So at this point, if you wish to turn it over to the delegates, and then I'll be available for any questions following that.
And I did it again. Thanks, Joe. Now thank you, Dominic. We'll turn it over to Mr. and Mrs. Mancini.
Mr. Mayor, Madam Deputy Mayor, Council, Administration. Fences are not structures. They can easily be moved. Administration in the past has directed at least one homeowner that had installed the fence in the wrong location to move that fence to its proper location at the homeowner's expense. The town of LaSalle has that right. This occurred on the property at 1599 Outram. This property was originally registered as 6355 Malden Road, and the owners of the property, Ravi and Shugam Sharma, built a new home fronting onto Outram. I spoke with Ravi Sharma, and he confirmed that he installed the fence in an improper location, and that the town of LaSalle did in fact direct him to move his fence at his own cost. He said he was happy to do so since the incorrect location of the fence was his own doing. This property had been surveyed. There are no other if there are no other encumbrances and the fence has encroached onto town property or an easement, administration should direct the homeowner to move the fence to its proper location, especially in cases where there are survey bars that are visible. There are no reasons for a homeowner to build a fence in an improper location on a surveyed lot. One reason does not supersede the other when it comes to directing homeowners to move their fences to a proper location. This should be adopted as policy immediately for all fences, not simply fences installed after July 1st, 2021. Past bad behavior should not be addressed, not simply bad behavior going forward. The town of LaSalle should not simply address the sins of the future with a drone. They also need to address the sins of the past. All alley inequities should be equally addressed, past and future. Land titles. The current registration system for property does not allow homeowners to argue squatters' rights against a town or a private owner. It is ludicrous that we allow the intruder, aggressor who has encroached on town land to have the first right of refusal. Ludicrous. It's like someone who broke into a bank and stole the $100,000, getting caught, going before a judge, admitting guilt, and getting convicted by the judge. And then the judge says, you have the first right of refusal to keep the $100,000. With no consequences, except for the payment of a court fee. This is not the way our legal system should work and is not within the spirit of our community. This is exactly what is happening with the new alley closing update as written. Thank you.
At the March 23rd meeting, a resolution was passed by council. I know Mr. DeDalt has spoken to most of the points in the resolution. However, this resolution has not been fully addressed by administration in their June 1st revised update. The main point that has been omitted is the potential of having the straight property line in the rear yard. Mr. DeDalt, it is possible, in our opinion, to put that into your update. We don't understand why you can't do that. From the last meeting, it was clear that many councillors appreciate the importance of regular straight lot lines along the back of properties. The straight lot line is vital to development property. Even Mr. Miller stated that the town of LaSalle tries to create these lot lines, straight lot lines, wherever possible. This is possible. Yet administration has chosen to exclude this request. In the revised update, it states on page 2 of 5 as follows. In the event the property owner chooses not to participate in the purchase at fair market value, the town will require the property owner remove any items from the said portion of the alley within a reasonable time limit, failing which the town will take the steps to remove the items at the sole expense of the property owner. So in other words, the town will in the future take steps to remove the items such as fences, etc., in the alley, but will not show fairness now by taking steps to remove the items there at present. The only part of the resolution that has been dealt with in depth is the payment of full value of an alley, should it be in conflict. And even this section is vague and incomplete. For example, who pays for the new reference plan that the town will need to order in order to redistribute alleys? We feel that the revised policy update should be amended to address any existing reference plans that have been registered and paid for by a third party other than the town of LaSalle. In these situations, there has been no cost so far to the town of LaSalle. The surveying and reference plan preparation for these properties have been paid for by a private party. Under these circumstances, the alley should be automatically allocated according to the existing registration of the reference plan. There is no reason for the town to prepare new reference plans. There are very few properties that fall into this category, and this would not create a significant increase in requests to appear before council by property owners, which seems to be what everybody's worried about. In summary, we believe that the revised closing and sale of alleys policy update should be amended to address the following points. Number one, the creation of straight lot lines along the back of properties as per council's motion. Number two, not give the intruder or aggressor the first right of refusal. Number three, ensure the allocation of alleys as per the existing registered reference plans in situations where the survey and registration were already paid for by a third party and not the town of LaSalle. Number four, adopt an alley policy effective immediately whereby the homeowner will be directed to remove his or her fence if the following criteria are met. The property of the person encroaching onto the alley has been surveyed, and therefore they should have been aware as to where the fence should have gone. Survey bars are visible. The property is registered under land titles. There are no easements in the alley, and there are no other encumbrances other than the fence in the alley. Under those circumstances, we feel that homeowners should be directed to remove their fences. This would ensure that the spirit of the Provincial Municipal Act, whereby alleys are to be split 50-50, would be maintained. It is not morally wrong for the town of LaSalle to ask homeowners to move fences. Administration has stated that the town is not in business to move fences, but in the past it has requested just that fences be moved, which is the right thing to do. And it intends to do so in the future, so why not now? We believe that administrations should make a strong effort to address our concerns and make changes that are fair and equitable to all, and not favor homeowners that have encroached on alleys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Mancini. We'll open up to council questions. Mr. Dudalt, you want to say something before we go to questions, and then we'll go to Councilor Reno.
Sure. I figured if it's okay with you, I wouldn't mind just clarifying a couple of the points that were raised just for council's information. I guess starting at the end there, one of the last points made was that there was provincial policy, or there was a requirement that lands or alleys should be split 50-50. Under the Municipal Act, there is no such requirement. The requirement is that a municipality has a policy with respect to distributing land. And that's what we are enacting in this case here. And we also have a separate policy for how we distribute our property in general. So that is in place, and it is in accordance with the provincial act that governs us here. Another example that was raised was with respect to the property at Outram and Malden, where a fence was moved or required to be moved when a house was built. My understanding there, and I wasn't involved with this directly, so this was, I believe we just had a brief conversation about it at one point. As far as I'm aware, that fence was actually built either in the road allowance or very close to it, where we had taken a daylight corner, and it was affecting sightline and visibility requirements from a safety concern coming down Malden Road or turning onto Malden Road from Outram. So that was the reason there. That it wasn't an alley issue. It was a safety issue at an intersection. And I see Peter just came on here. Maybe he was more directly involved with that than I was, that he could maybe clarify.
Mr. Mara.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Mayor, members of council. Certainly the issue relative to Outrim and Malden Road relates back to a severance. That was one lot that fronted onto Malden Road. That was a severance that was created to create two lots that now fronted onto Outram. As part of that severance application, the town took property along Malden Road to accommodate our Malden Road widening. So that was acquired, and not really acquired, it was given to us again through Planning Act requirements. We are allowed to take land. So certainly when the home on the corner was built, they put the fence on the original right-of-way limit. And that was the motion and the requirement to move the fence off of that right-of-way limit. So we're talking about a fence along the right-of-way limit of an arterial road, not a fence along any sort of alley. And certainly, as Mr. Dadalt had mentioned, that is located at an intersection as well. So certainly we needed to make sure that that fence was not causing any sightline issues. So the reference and kind of terminology that is kind of trying to relate moving of fences relative to alleys, not that I can recall in certainly my 11 years with the town that any fence has been moved in alleys or we forced anybody to move fences. We do force people to move things as they come into the public right of ways where there's actually a road and transportation issues, sightline issues, and things of that nature. We also require people to remove landscaping and things of that nature as well. So that will certainly continue on in the future as those matters become problematic for traffic movements and sightlines and safety operations of traffic. Just wanted to provide that context with respect to what occurred on Outram. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mara. Looks like Mr. Dult has something to add.
Thank you, Peter, for jumping in on that one there and giving the history. And then I just had one more point, I guess, with respect to there was comment about how fences can easily be moved, and yes, fences, structures, sheds, everything can be moved. That's why, though, the policy, whether the reason that there is no straight line in this policy, again, is there's two ways to go. It's either recognize what's there or get in the business of removing everything. And fences, as per the definition that we're pointing in from our zoning bylaw, structure shall mean anything including all parts which is erected, built, or constructed and affixed to or supported by the ground. So a fence does meet that definition, and that's why we are pulling that in to ensure, once again, that all these items that come up that are found consistently throughout the alleys in the town are addressed. So just wanted to raise that point, and that's to ensure consistency throughout the numerous alleys that we have still coming up that will have to be dealt with by administration. So just to give some clarity on some of the points that were raised there.
Thank you, Mr. Dadalt. Councillor Reno.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to, first of all, try to separate the fact that there's an active case over in the Mancini's neighborhood, separate that from the actual policy. I think the improvements on the policy, Dominic, are good. The change in structure to fair market value will make a huge difference on people that are encumbering these alleys. It's not a secret that properties, land in LaSalle is going for $250,000 a lot. Do the math. This is no longer a chance for somebody to come in and give a couple $1,000s and pick up something that they stole. You're now talking 10 times that amount. So I think that is going to give some teeth to these people that have done the wrong thing. And I think it's the most important thing is for this policy, though, is that, if we do have someone that disagrees with the policy, is they still have the ability to come before council. Even if it seems like they've been in front of council many times now, they have the right on their own issue to come and fight that issue. So, as long as that's still in the policy, I think the improvements are very good. And I think it really speaks to what council was looking for, which was to take care of those ones that have gotten away with things for so long. So thank you, Dominic.
Thank you, Councillor Reno. Any other council questions? Seeing none, council's pleasure. Councilor Reno.
I'll move the motion.
Councilor Reno moves the motion. Support. Councilor Carrick. All in favor? Opposed, if any? One opposed. That carries. Thank you.
Can you believe that?
Okay. Now we have transit bicycle lockers, and I believe we have John Gills, or we don't. Tano, I see you.
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Gills will not be here? I had him as a delegate.
Mr. Gills is part of the following delegation.
The which one?
The next report.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the finance. I'm jumping ahead. Okay. I have the bicycle lockers. I'm sorry. I don't know why this one's out of order. Okay, go ahead, Tano.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. The report before you relates to the installation of transit bicycle lockers located throughout the town, funded primarily through a grant. The public transit stream of the Investing in Canada Infrastructure program provides funding for projects that improve capacity, quality, or access to public transportation. This project improves access to public transit. Typically, transit stops have a catchment area of 400 meters, and individuals walk to those transit stops. By installing bicycle lockers, this allows for safe storage of bicycles and for transit users to ride their bicycles and store them at the bicycle locker near a transit stop. This project would see 10 bicycle lockers, which can hold 20 bikes at one time, installed throughout the town at various proposed locations, which are highlighted in the appendix. In addition, one additional bicycle locker has been provided to the town through the CWATS partnership program through the county and is also planned to be installed at the Volmer. This project maximizes the grant funding to the tune of $52,000, and the town share would be about $18,000. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Council questions. Councilor Akpata.
Thank you, Your Worship. To you, sir, I had a question from an avid cyclist friend of mine, of which I am not. He indicated that these are spread out throughout the GTA where he does a lot of his riding. I just want to, he's asked me to make sure that he can understand the time of bicycle storage. Do we have any specific time for a person to leave their bicycle there to remove it? And how will we ensure, based on his interpretation, that other folks will not be able to take his bicycle should he leave it there for an extended period of time? Apparently, the reference he gave in Toronto is that some of these large bicycle lockers are accessible through all the bicycles stored there. I've got to believe that we'd have some sort of independent locking system or something so that no bicycle could be taken by somebody else when they went to go put their bike away. It's just a question that I was asked.
I see that Mr. Morrow joined us, but I will answer that first part. That is true. There are individual locks per bicycle. Peter, do you want to add anything further to that?
Yes, so these are specifically made for that particular purpose. The county has these installed throughout the county already. We are going to be using the same system. And if I recall correctly, I believe it is all done through an app-based product. So it is an app that you have to put your information in and use your phone, and you need to use the same phone to open it. That is the security that is provided through this system. So certainly that is what is being proposed. These are standard types of bicycle lockers intended and meant for this exact purpose. So hopefully that provides the assistance for you, Councilor Akpata, to provide this resident an answer. And certainly there are existing ones in the county already. If you again, I believe they're located throughout the county and all the municipalities. And if he wanted to review some of those, he could get that information, and that's available on the county website as well right now.
Thank you very much. That'll be very, very helpful to refer him to get on his bicycle and ride out into the county and see how the same units would be applicable in LaSalle. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Any other council questions? Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you. Through you to, I don't know if this would be Peter or Chano. If we find that we're successful with these bike lockers, is this something that will be built into future budgets to add at more popular locations?
Thank you. Certainly, if they do become popular, these are really meant to be part of a transit system to extend that, what they call the first and last mile. It extends our reach slightly and significantly, actually. So those who are not within a 400-meter walking distance of a bus route, they can now hop on their bike, and those who don't want to take their bike on the bus with them or part of it, they can have the opportunity to lock it up. So certainly, if it becomes very successful, there is certainly opportunity for us to continue to expand this program in the future. And certainly, we would come forward to council at the appropriate time and budget time to continue to try to expand these. But certainly, once these get introduced, we'll get some of that feedback on how popular they are and how well they're utilized. So certainly, it is an option.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. Any other council questions? Council's pleasure. Motion received by Councillor Desjardins, seconded by Deputy Mayor Malash. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you, Tom. Okay, sorry, Mr. Gillis. LaSalle Community Healthcare Center, Inc. Mr. Burgess.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. The proposal before you tonight for site plan control is for 100 square meter expansion to the existing LaSalle Medical Clinic. I spoke to Mr. Gillis earlier this evening, and the proposal before you has no impact on parking, as there is excess parking in the lot, and has no impact on any kind of zoning issues, as it fully complies with the zoning bylaw. If the council has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any council questions? Council's pleasure. Moved by Councillor Reno, support by Councillor Dicho Spagnolo. All in favor? Opposed, if any? None. That carries unanimously. Thank you. Town Hall renovations pre-tender award. Mr. Mara.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight's report is a bit of a one-off situation relative to the pandemic situation that we find ourselves in. As we have been going out to get and secure prices for works, what we are being requested is to provide approval as quickly as we can to the contractors, because they are having a difficult time securing and ordering materials. And as such, so we thought we'd try this out on this particular job. So we are currently out for town hall renovations. That entails the renovations here at town hall for additional offices and some more boardroom space. And certainly we are currently out for tender. It closes on Friday. So with this report tonight before you, we are seeking council's pre-approval to award this for the administration to award and give formal approval to the contractor if the value submitted falls within the budgeted number of $110,000 plus 25% variance, so that we can get that moving. Of course, there is going to be the appropriate bylaw to execute the agreement at a subsequent council meeting, but at least we are able to provide the contractor some quick turnaround on notifying them that they can get materials order, and it will help expedite the contract a little bit more. So we're trying this on this particular job. So with that, the recommendation before you is part of the report, and look forward to any council questions.
Any council questions? Council's pleasure. Moved by Councillor Desjardins, support by Councillor Dicho Spagnolo. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. And addendum brought on Sandwich Secondary Graduation Parade of Cars. Mr. Militia.
Mr. Mayor, can you hear me at this point?
Pardon?
Again, the report is before council as part of the addendum I know that Deputy Mayor Malash is working with the high school to create a celebration for graduation, which unfortunately through the COVID side of things, they were not able to have the traditional graduation ceremony. So they are looking to do a parade. I think it basically starts at the foot of Laurier at the waterfront and proceeds easterly along Laurier all the way to Sandwich Secondary through that process. I believe that the date is set for June 29th, if I'm not mistaken, at 2 p.m. So again, assuming council approves the road closures, we do encourage folks to try to socially distance on Laurier to congratulate those graduates as they're entering another phase of their life. So the report is before council along with the associated bylaw. Deputy Mayor Malash, I'm not sure if you have anything else to add.
Thank you, Mr. I actually don't have anything to add. As you said, it's planned for next Tuesday, which is also the day of their Zoom graduation that evening. So it's really just a day to celebrate the graduates. Any questions, and I'll hopefully be able to answer them for you.
Councilor Renner.
I have no questions. I think, as we all know, for the last 2 years, our graduates have gotten shafted, if that's a word we can use. You know what? These kids have worked hard. They have tried to learn a new reality and trying to learn on the computer. I can tell you just by sitting in a conference about a month ago, it's really hard to engage and to understand and to retain the information that's put through a computer screen. I give them all credit. I think they are probably all a lot more successful than I would be if I was in their shoes. So I think anything we can do to help celebrate them and to reward them for a job well done, we just have to do it. So I'll just move the motion right now.
Moved by Councilor Reno, support by, is that Anita? Do you have, are you supporting? Do you have a question? Supporting, okay. Moved by Councilor Reno, support by Councilor Dicho Spagnolo. Discussion on the motion. I just have a couple comments. I'm in favor. As we sat through our meeting for 2 hours and 36 minutes so far, I watched all the graduates across the school walk in, walk out. They cleaned up the parking lot, and it was nice to see. That's where my kids went years ago. I don't have a problem in principle. My only concern is and correct me, Mr. Militia, if I'm wrong, the only thing, the event that we pay for, the municipality, is for a strawberry festival, right? For road closures, police, whatever we have to pay for.
Again, Mr. Mayor, traditionally we have two parades that, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Traditionally we have two parades in town. One is related to the Strawberry Festival. The second is related to the Turtle Club Parade, Opening Day Parade. Those are the two that we generally have at this point and traditionally have. We have had other ones, just one-offs here and there, but for the most part, those are the two annual events that we have.
Okay, so if we have to close roads, and I believe Chief Davies is here, and we have police, I don't know if they're bringing in extra for overtime. Is this a cost that we'll have to pay for, Mr. Militia? Because we have one school we're doing it for. There's going to be a lot coming after us if we don't do this properly. So I just want to make sure that council's aware that if we say yes, there may be other schools within the municipality. So Joe, if we have to close roads, I don't know who answers this, Peter, you, Chief Davies, what the cost might be? I don't want to say yes before we know what it's going to cost us, if at all.
Sure. So again, the cost to the municipality is basically a labor type cost that we have. I know that depending on when the event is, so again, the cost to close Front Road, for example, as part of the Turtle Club Parade, can be somewhat substantial just because it's happening usually on a Saturday morning and it's going along Front Road and then up Ream Road. So there's a lot of activity that we have to control with traffic. And so there's a lot of barricades we put up along that way. I think this is a bit different, and we view it more as a procession, if you will. And so the amount of side street closures may be limited. And because of the time of day that it's happening, we will have forces on staff as opposed to coming here on overtime. That doesn't mean that we won't have additional costs. And again, Acting Chief Davies can speak to that in terms of the police side of things. But certainly there is a cost component, but not to the same degree. Just on your other point, Mr. Mayor, I did reach out to the Deputy Mayor and ask about other schools, and she had indicated that the other high school at this point is not interested in holding this type of event. And we have not heard from any of the other grade schools or any of those at this point in time. So this is the only school at this point that has approached us with this type of event.
Okay, thank you. Acting Chief Davies.
Good evening, Your Worship, and members of council. Just with respect to, I guess it comes down to definitions. And as Mr. Militia alluded to, whether it's a procession or a parade, looking at what we did for the Strawberry Festival, obviously closing roads, a parade moving slowly, pedestrians on the roadway, people sitting on the back of vehicles, that kind of thing is a concern. So obviously a road closure is important for something along that line. If it becomes a procession where it's more or less like a police escort where we're moving vehicles en masse from one parking lot to the next, we could do that in a more, I guess, organized fashion to get people through the roadways quicker. And it depends on who is lining up on either side of the road and that kind of thing too. So Laurier is a long stretch. We do have to cross Front Road. We'll have to cross at Matchett, which is the main thoroughfare, also turning onto Malden Road as well. We can certainly manage that, but it depends on what the parameters are we're going to set for the vehicle. So if each person is going to stay within a vehicle inside in a seated vehicle or in a seat in a vehicle with a seatbelt on, they're obeying the rules of the road. That just makes it a quick procession. We can get people moved through pretty quickly. If you have a pickup truck with people sitting on the back and people standing on the side of roadways and that, then that becomes a safety issue where we want to close the road for that. So my preferred method in looking at the whole thing here is we could certainly, if we did a procession, we could put an escort on front and back and also be able to block Front Road to get everybody through en masse. Same thing with Matchett Road and onto Malden Road and get people into the parking lot quickly. I am looking at some additional staff to do that. I am going to incur some kind of cost for that. I was thinking of having a couple of units on overtime for that. So there will be some cost involved. However, as it's already been mentioned, I think it's important too to recognize certainly what the graduates have been put up against with COVID. And we certainly want to be a part of that celebration for them and let them know that the police are with them as well. So I will be present myself that day, and we will have some additional staff as well.
Thank you. To Deputy Mayor Meloche, do you know, because it says Salmon Secondary Graduation Parade, do you know if it's going to be a procession type or parade type?
I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to reach out to a couple of the parents. I think parade is the word used, and I only say parade by looking at pictures that were posted from last year. Amherstburg did the same thing for their graduates, and I believe they're doing it again this year for their high schools or high school. It was a parade in the sense that I believe there may have been people in the back of a pickup truck. I don't know the exact plan for this one, if that's something we can change or not. I know when speaking with Sergeant Officer, Sanjari, we were speaking about the speed of what they were looking for. Obviously, they're not looking to go 50 kilometers an hour down the road and zoom past everybody. They are looking for a slower type procession to be able to, see their family and friends and pictures as they pass by. But I could maybe after the meeting get the other information forwarded to you, Acting Chief, to be able to assist with that planning process.
I'm asking questions here and people are probably going to say, well, why is he against it? I'm not against it. I just want to make sure that before we say yes, and then we throw this to Acting Chief Duncan Davies and say it's a parade. Now he's closing how many side streets, and we're calling in people to Public Works to close the roads and whatnot. So just so I'm clear, if it's a parade, Acting Chief, and it is more road closures, and this is happening next Tuesday, can you handle that on the short notice? If it's a parade, if it's just a procession, not an issue?
As far as the police resources, we should be able to handle that fine. Whether or not Board of Works would be able to come up with barricades and that kind of thing to put things out, that's another element here that we may want to consider too. And as Mr. Militia alluded to, if they're available that day, that would certainly assist. But again, judging by what the speed is, again, I guess to clarify a couple of things, if people were seated in the vehicles as they should be, if it's traveling along the roadway, again, we could slow the speed down. We could look at it like it is a procession, similar to what we would do with a funeral, and we can get the vehicles en masse from one location to the next, as well as trying to honor those graduates and being able to pass by the people that they need to. So again, my biggest concern is probably crossing Front Road, because that's going to be the first part of it. And how long is that going to take? Are we talking 10 minutes? Are we talking 60 minutes, 70 minutes? So there's some question there as to how long it's going to be. And I'm not really sure, but I think my understanding is there's around 200 graduates. So that might be one per car. And if that's the case, then that is a number of vehicles that will have to certainly move from one place to the next.
Okay. If we can handle it, I have no objection to it in a nice, safe manner. Mr. Militia.
Again, certainly from our perspective, in terms of the definition, and I know we're getting caught with that, and most users don't really, they use it interchangeably, and again, understanding that. But if we can, as Acting Chief Davies has indicated, if we can keep people seated in the vehicles as they would normally be and control the speed of traffic, and treat it more like a procession, it gets things much easier for us. And I think if we can maybe perhaps send that message back to the organizing group, that is what we need to have happen in that manner. Because as soon as it doesn't happen in that way, we are closing many roads along that road. And again, we will be rearranging a work schedule for Public Works as we go through that process, because we will need to get barricades up. We'll need to have folks flagging traffic through. And again, although it is at an ideal time of day, those are some of the other issues that we're going to run into. We will run into some traffic concerns being raised. So if we can, again, put the message back to the organizing committee that our preference is that it is going to be treated as a procession, and that there are going to be, folks are going to be in their vehicles as they normally would be, but just at a slower speed.
Hey, graduation's a great time. I remember when I did it, and it was a moment of celebration. I think for me, it lasted 5 minutes, then I started the job. So, but things are different, and with COVID, it definitely is a time to celebrate. So I don't know, is the motion, if it's a procession, it's okay. If it's a parade, we might have to look into it more. I'm not sure what is council's pleasure. I'm assuming there's more planning involved, Joe, at your end and at Acting Chief Davies' end. If it becomes a parade, there's 200 cars, and it's going to take not minutes, but hours to move them through an intersection, possibly. You agree with that? Okay, so it's council's pleasure how they want to handle this. Councilor Renaud.
Provided that I'd like to make the motion that provided that the participants are in vehicles and not walking along the side,
okay,
that we will provide road closure to accommodate this procession.
Mr. Militia, is that clear enough for a resolution?
I'm just looking over at the Deputy Clerk. I believe that is clear. And again, I just look to Acting Chief Davies if that's appropriate direction that he can work with as well.
Yeah, certainly. This isn't new to us when it comes to funeral processions and large number of vehicles moving from one place to the other at a slow speed. So I would look at it the same way, as long as people knew to keep themselves in their proper seats with the seatbelts on. We could certainly make this happen pretty uneventful, I would assume.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Malash, are you comfortable with that?
I am, and I think realistically speaking, I realize there's 240 something graduates, but I would be very surprised to see that many vehicles. I would probably say you're probably under 100 vehicles. You'll probably see multiple graduates in a vehicle doing this celebration together, since they can have a couple people in the vehicle with them. So I would definitely say it's probably not going to be quite 200 something cars. I would not expect that.
Okay. Councillor Rennie.
I think it's fair to say if Mr. Toffelmeyer was still on the line, he could probably tell you exactly how many cars and how many each wheels they'd have.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, moved by Councillor Reno, support by Councillor Dicho Spagnolo. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Now we go to Bylaw Committee meeting. Deputy Mayor Crystal Malash.
Thank you. I don't believe there's anything to add at this time, but if anyone has any questions, I'll be able to answer them for you.
Okay, council's pleasure. Questions? Motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Reno, support by Councillor Desjardins. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Now we have the Fire Committee meeting. Councillor Reno.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's not much to add to the minutes. I wanted to bring everyone's attention to the fact that these are actually a new format at this meeting with a new chief. So Chief Thiessen has put his own spin on the way that we're going to have our meetings. And one of the things that we are going to eliminate, which is a little bit frustrating for, I would imagine, for other members of council, is that you'd see these agendas and minutes, and 3/4 of them were verbal updates. So that means I know and you don't know, and that you have to call me and find out what all that meant. He's moving to eliminate that, and he's putting in like a quick little section for updates so that everyone's on the same page, and it helps the transparency. And I think it was a great meeting, and it moved very well, and I look forward to the next one.
Perfect. Council's pleasure. Motion to receive, Councillor Desjardins, Councillor Dicho Spagnolo. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. We have two bylaws, 8578 and 8579 on all three readings. Deputy Mayor Malash and Councillor Reno, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. Council questions.
Item G, the summary reports to council.
Oh, thank you. Summary reports to council. Moved by Councillor Reno, supported by Deputy Mayor Malash. All in favor? That carries. Thanks. I'm glad you can't see my desk right now. Thank you, Mr. Militia. Okay, council questions. Councillor Akpata.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Mr. Militia, with the slow roll that's going on with the province of Ontario and the COVID restrictions, Mr. Militia, can you let us update us as to where you see us as a municipality and where you see us going over the next little while, sir?
Thank you, Councillor Akpata, for the question. Certainly, we are working hand in hand in developing our reopening plan to match the provincial three-step roadmap that they have announced. Again, our folks in Culture and Rec are probably the most impacted, and they're looking towards reopening the facility at the Volmer and some of our outdoor facilities as well, to create kind of that welcome back feeling. We certainly, again, we're working on those timelines that have been set, meaning I believe it's July 5th and July 26th are the two keystone dates. We are hearing some rumors that those may be up, fast tracked, because provincially there are the case counts are coming down. We're also hearing, though, that there are some concerns with the Delta variant and the Delta variant, that we would go through that may impact our reopening plan. So there's a bit of good and bad coming through that, and we're starting to get used to that as part of the pandemic. But we certainly, again, have plans in place. I know that the pool is slated to open. I believe the outdoor pool is slated to open on July 5th. We do have some of the outdoor amenities in terms of the soccer fields already open to a certain level of play. Those, again, are slated to take the next step on July 5th. We have been successful, believe it or not. One of the biggest challenges we had was obtaining the line paint for our outdoor fields because for the most part, outdoor fields have been closed for the better part of a year. And that does have a shelf life. And so we've been able to obtain some of the line paint, unfortunately at an increased cost, but we have been able to obtain that. So we will start lining the fields and getting those ready for play starting on July 5th. So we are working through those processes. We are also developing a plan in terms of reopening the Vollmer, much like what we did in early March when just before the third wave hit. We are looking at a gradual reopening. Some of what we're hearing is some of the provincial associations that govern minor hockey certainly have certain regulations that our local chapter has to follow. And so we're taking those into account. The Vipers have announced an opening day as well. So we're taking all those factors into account, and we expect that the Vollmer will start to reopen on or about the 26th of July on a slow, gradual basis as we go through this. One of the challenges that we've had, quite frankly, is that as we effectively stopped our recreational activities last year in April and May, we unfortunately had to lay off a lot of our part-time staff, some of which had been with us for some time. And again, our part-time staff that work in the recreational field tend to do that through high school and beyond. But they tend to also, over the last year and a half, have also moved on, migrated, graduated, moved on to other professions and career aspirations. So we are rebuilding, if you will, our staffing down at the Vollmer. We, much like many of the other recreational facilities, are having challenges with that. Pre-COVID, we had challenges with getting aquatic staff, for example, and we continue to have that challenge as we go forward. So we certainly are moving in that direction. All the plans are in place, and we are consistently trying to keep tabs on that. We meet rather regularly as a senior management team to see where we're at and see what needs to happen from that perspective. So we seem to be moving in the right direction. That's a very positive side. We expect that the target date that we're looking towards, fingers crossed, that vaccination efforts continue and that the variants are held at bay. We're looking at the Labor Day timeframe that things will start to get back to normal. We're also looking at the other target date is kind of the Canadian Thanksgiving, because I think by that time that the educational institutions will be open again, schools will be open, and school-age kids will be back into school, and we may see some impacts of that, but may not. But that's where we're headed for. So very positive. Again, probably the most positive we've been in about 16 months, quite frankly. And so it's nice to see. I mean, our staff is very eager to open up the Vollmer. We've taken advantage of this prolongated closure to do a lot of the maintenance work down at the Vollmer. So folks returning will see a building that looks very much like the building that we had when we first opened, in terms of, and hats off to the facilities crew and the facility operators down at the Vollmer and some of our other facilities as well. They've done a lot of work in a short period of time rather quickly in order to get the facility back up and running and back in a format. So we really do look forward to that. Again, we see, we're looking, one of the missing pieces that we're waiting for is a bit of the regulations that follow those July 5th and July 26th dates. We expect them to come out shortly, and that will help us guide kind of how fast we can open, how many people we are allowed in the buildings and so forth. So we understand that the province is busy with some of the things that they're dealing with in terms of the COVID pandemic. So we can't push too hard, but we are looking forward to hearing and seeing some of those regulations so that we can finalize our plans and really start to get rolling in terms of staffing and program offerings and things of that nature.
Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any other council questions? Statements by council members? Reports from committees? Okay, we have a notice of motion, and just for clarity, Mr. Militia, maybe you should speak to that on who can do what, please. Thank you.
Absolutely. So again, we've outlined it in the agenda in terms of we've had a request for a reconsideration. This is a bit unusual because this item was discussed already as part of reconsideration, but one item that was added to the reconsideration motion was only discussed once. And so we are bringing proceeding cautiously and in an open and transparent way. We are bringing forward that part of the resolution in which we're dealing with the sidewalk that dealt with the 3 homes between Richmond and Sovereign. So that is the reconsideration that you see before you. Just from a procedural perspective and discussions with the deputy clerk, again, in order to move this forward, will require a mover from the majority. And so I believe that that would include Mayor Bondi, Councillor Sue Desjardins, Councillor Mark Carrick, and Councillor Jeff Reno. Councillor Akpata was absent at that meeting, so he's not allowed to move. And Deputy Mayor Crystal Malash and Councillor Riccio Spagnolo were in the on the negative or were opposed, so they are not able to move the motion. So in order, anyone can second the motion, including Councillor Akpata, who happened to be absent for that particular meeting. Anybody can second the motion, but the motion needs to be moved by one of the folks that were in the majority. And then and all members of council can vote on the motion. So just for clarity perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Militia.
Sorry, one last comment.
Yes.
With respect to motion to reconsider, this is one of those items that I don't believe that there is much discussion that is allowed. I believe that the mover can make a short statement. That is the only, which is a little different than what we would normally have for a regular motion that we would have before council.
But if there is a question on what they're doing, why they're doing it, they can ask that. If they're not clear on why we're reconsidering.
On the process.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. So council members, any questions on the process? Seeing none, is there anybody who wants to move for reconsideration? Seeing none, the reconsideration fails. Confirmatory bylaw. First reading. Deputy Mayor Malash, Councillor Reno, all in favor? That carries. Second reading. Councillor Desjardins, Councillor Riccio Spagnolo, all in favor? That carries. Third and final reading, Councillor Akpata and Councillor Carrick, all in favor? That carries. Everyone have a good night. Thank you, viewing audience. It's probably one of our record time meetings, a little over 3 hours. Doesn't happen often, but we got a lot accomplished